summer of 1994, I read an article in a health newsletter which reviewed the most controversial drug application in the history of America's Food and Drug Administration. Monsanto Agricultural Company had isolated the naturally occurring bovine growth hormone. They then found a way to combine that hormone with microorganisms bringing genetic material from cows and E. coli bacteria to achieve a new product, which, when injected back into cows, would result in an increase in milk production. That new hormone was called recombinant bovine somatotropin, better known as BST. An investigation of that new hormone and of milk and dairy products released a Pandora's box of demons and dilemmas that milk producers had wished had never been exposed. As a result of that subsequent investigation, many questions were asked. The answers to those questions will place America's entire dairy industry in jeopardy. Hundreds of millions of dollars are invested each year by the dairy industry and milk processors to ensure that Americans will drink milk and eat dairy products. Some of those dollars are used to pay for advertising, and some of those dollars are donated to congressmen and senators who vote on issues affecting the dairy industry. Some of those dollars are paid to the American Dietitians Association, which promotes the use of milk and dairy products. Some of those dollars are granted to universities to finance research that supports the marketing message of the Dairy Coalition. Adult Americans would react with disgust when faced with the suggestion of drinking human breast milk. How about milk from man's best friends, his cats and dogs? Instinctively, one knows that there are substances in milk which are intended for the young of each species, yet we continue to drink milk from cows. That practice has been made acceptable. We drink a tall glass of milk, unaware that we are also consuming powerful growth hormones, enormous quantities of dietary cholesterol, fat, allergenic proteins, insecticides, antibiotics, virus, and bacteria. Breakfast without cereal moistened with milk would be extremely boring. Late evening cookies without milk would be unsatisfying. In between breakfast and late-night snack, we eat yogurt and pizza and cream cheese on bagels. Ice cream is the perfect dessert to any meal. Cheese, butter, sour cream, and cottage cheese. It would be difficult to give up dairy products. Just to ensure that we do not, the dairy industry invests their money to continuously let Americans know that milk tastes good and the intake of milk and dairy products must be continued to ensure good health. A big surprise right under your nose. That's the message promoted by the National Fluid Milk Processors, the marketing arm of America's dairy industry. Their directive is clear. Milk mustaches are stylish. Drink milk and you're beautiful. Gorgeous models, actors, actresses, sports heroes, even President Clinton and Bob Dole have posed for milk advertisements, all by asserting with milky white glue artificially applied to their upper lip that drinking milk is healthy and wholesome. Who would argue with such overwhelming endorsements? Billboard Spanning America asked the question, got milk? Americans love milk. Americans need milk. African Americans, Caucasians, male and female, young and old, wholesome milk. American as apple pie. The skillfully marketed message is constantly reinforced. Milk, what a surprise. Milk has been called the most perfect food on earth. Who calls it that? The dairy industry? Madison Avenue? Our mothers? Their mothers? 7 generations of mothers? From childhood, we accept the myth and practice the tradition that milk is essential for growth and good health. It takes 21.2 pounds of milk to make a pound of butter. One little piece used to fry your eggs and butter your toast is made from approximately 1 pound of milk. American parents use milk to make breakfast a 30-second affair. A portion of cereal sprinkled into a bowl, dusted with sugar and softened in nice, cold, wholesome milk, ensures that a healthy, nourishing breakfast is eaten by Junior before school. Eggs take a few minutes to prepare. Every child would like a Western omelet, 2 pieces of buttered whole wheat toast, freshly squeezed juice, if only mom or dad had the time. Rip, pour, open, flow, sprinkle, snap, crackle, pop, and off to school. Dietitians, family doctors, and school nurses all agree that milk helps build strong bodies and is an important part of every American's diet. The National Institutes of Health agree, so does the Journal of the American Medical Association. Wholesome milk. It provides calcium and phosphorus and sodium. It gives you protein and carbohydrates and fat. It adds vitamins A and C and D to your diet. It tastes great alone and better with a chocolate brownie. It's a requisite ingredient with a bowl of dry cereal. It makes a great bedtime snack with cookies for children. Milk makes coffee palatable for millions. It's in hot chocolate and chocolate pudding and squirts as whipped cream on ice cream covered with a caramel sauce made with milk. We grate cheese on our pasta and cover our pizzas with gooey mozzarella. We eat fermented milk with bacteria and yeast as yogurt for good health. We spread butter on our toast, use it to saute onions and peppers, and our chicken jalapeno and cream of mushroom soup would be less tasty without the dairy influence. Life would be so boring without dairy products. The information here is going to provide a really big surprise. Farmers who milk and feed their cows are going to be surprised. So are the truck drivers who haul 50,000-pound tanks of milk from farm to processor. The supermarket managers who carefully plan and situate their milk cases as far from the front door as possible, they'll be in for a big surprise. So will consumers who buy gallons of milk each week to ensure the good health of their families. Doctors who know better are going to be surprised, and dietitians who should know better but don't, well, they're going to have their big surprise too. Perhaps the most surprised folks will be those to whom we've entrusted our health needs. The people at the Food and Drug Administration and the scientists and administrators at the United States Department of Agriculture. These people act as our fiduciaries, and they do know better. The scientists who have the actual research evidence that refutes dairy industry publicity know better. These people are aware of bits and pieces of the evidence. There is another group of people who should know better, but money gets in their way. We elect them to Congress, but they take bribes in the form of PAC money from the dairy industry to look the other way. They know nothing except the way to the bank. Finally, there are the research scientists who have changed milk by genetically engineering it. These men and women employed by pharmaceutical companies do know better, and they are going to have one unfortunate surprise when their secrets are revealed. They've taken wholesome milk, which was never really intended to be consumed by humans, and they've changed it so remarkably that it doesn't come close to resembling the white fluid which comes directly from the udder of a cow. Milk, what a surprise. How times change. By the mid-1800s, the average cow yielded just under 2 quarts of milk each per day. By 1960, that yield was over 9 quarts per animal per day. Today, thanks to new techniques, including increased use of antibiotics, genetically selective breeding, and my own personal favorite, genetic engineering, cows can yield up to 50 quarts of milk per day, with the average dairy cow producing 18,000 pounds per year, or 24 quarts daily. Pasteurization. In 1856, Louis Pasteur began experiments resulting in a new technology that rewarded Pasteur by borrowing his name. Thank goodness this process was not developed by my great-grandfather on my mother's side. His name was Simon Lipschitz. Then we would have milk that was, well, use your imagination. There'd be enormous confusion with respect to its wholesomeness, although there would be poetic justice in such a label and warning. Amid great controversy, Chicago passed the first American pasteurization law in 1908. Most current-day Americans have never tasted real milk. Fresh from the udder, milk foams at body temperature. When chilled, the taste changes. Londoners have acquired the taste for warm beer in British pubs. Warm beer, warm milk, acquired tastes. Pasteurized milk is heated milk. It has been cooked to kill the bacteria, then quickly chilled. Tuberculosis epidemics, botulism, myriads of disease spread throughout the milk supply made pasteurization necessary. Yet, the essence of milk changed. Pasteurization destroys vitamins and enzymes. In 1908, doctors, dietitians, and health activists condemned the process. Imagine taking delicate strawberries and cooking them. Note the difference between fresh apple cider and commercially prepared and bottled apple juice. Taste the crisp burst of flavor from a luscious apple, and follow that with a mouthful of cooked applesauce. What have we done to milk by pasteurizing it? We killed the goodness and flavor. But if we hadn't gone to such extremes, we would have witnessed the end of the dairy industry. Unpasteurized wholesome milk was the ideal environment for bacteria to rapidly multiply. In 1932, a procedure revealing artificially produced vitamin D into milk was developed. Technological advances soon ensured that milk would not separate. Homogenization, a process begun in 1919, became the standard and not the exception. In 1964, plastic milk containers were first commercially introduced. Later, labeling laws required mandatory nutrition information on every container of milk sold. Politics and science. When mankind began to tamper with nature's own substance again in the 1990s, controversy followed. Genetic engineering. There was a movement to label the milk containing the new genetically engineered hormones. Scientists, politicians, and admin with marketing ability determined the policy. They reasoned that the public would not buy a milk with warnings that had been genetically engineered. To hell with the public's right to know. In an incredible act of political intrigue, Monsanto's very own attorney resigned from his law firm to go to work for the FDA. Genetically engineered milk is indistinguishable from normal wholesome milk, wrote Michael Taylor, a partner at King & Spalding, the powerful and connected Washington law firm. Overnight, Michael Taylor became one of the powers at FDA. Once there, he would continue to work in his new capacity for his old client, Monsanto. He wrote the labeling laws and lied to the citizens of America. Taylor said that the milk from cows treated with genetically engineered bovine growth hormone is indistinguishable from normal milk. Although Congress investigated this conflict of interest, he was subsequently rewarded by being named the acting Undersecretary of Food Safety at the United States Department of Agriculture. Before joining King & Spalding in 1981, Taylor served as executive assistant to the Commissioner of FDA. He then practiced food and drug law for 10 years at King & Spalding before rejoining FDA. After his task at FDA was fulfilled, he went to work at the USDA, where he continued to carry through policy favoring the new biotechnology. As of November 1996, Taylor was back at the law firm. So, today the public does not know whether the milk they buy has been treated with a genetically recombined hormone that has been recombined with E. coli bacteria, or whether the milk is the same wholesome product they've been drinking since childhood. The average milk yield from a dairy cow in India is under 3 quarts per day, with the average per capita milk consumption equal to 3 ounces per day. In the United States, the average dairy cow produces 24 quarts per day. Pasteurization, homogenization, and genetic engineering. We've changed the milk. Our milk has been altered, and only a relatively small sample of America's population is aware of the change. Some people have heard of BST, bovine somatotropin, or BGH, bovine growth hormone. BST and BGH are 2 different acronyms for the same hormone that is naturally present in milk. Some consumers have become very discriminating purchasers, refusing to drink milk containing hormones, unaware that all milk carries growth hormones. Milk naturally embodies hormones. Those natural hormones have been genetically engineered and combined with genetic material from bacteria. When a hormone is recombined with genetic material from another species of animal, the resulting hormone has the letter R placed before it. Therefore, BST becomes RBST, and BGH becomes RBGH. Milk from cows injected with RBST or RBGH contains more hormones. There is much misunderstanding on this controversial issue. The reason for this misunderstanding lies, an appropriate word, with the Food and Drug Administration, which informed America that RBST-treated milk and normal wholesome milk were indistinguishable. The new drug, called BST, would then be injected into cows. The BST-treated cows would then produce more milk. The controversy revealed that there might be problems with the milk. The more I learned, the more concerned I became for my children. I certainly could control the milk my children consumed. It was summer, but there were personnel working at the Board of Education at the public school which they attended. After a few phone calls, I learned that their school was negotiating with a new milk supplier. They were about to sign a contract to buy milk from a company that was buying milk from dairies that treated their cows with this new hormone. I protested this decision by writing letters, making phone calls, and successfully stalled this decision. Instead, the school bought milk from a supplier who stated that his dairy farmers did not use the new hormone and he would not accept milk from the cows treated with RBST. That was good enough for me. I had won a minor skirmish. Soon there'd be more battles. Few doctors or scientists have the opportunity, or more specifically, the time and desire to spend 2 years reading, analyzing, and looking at every aspect of research and contacting hundreds of labs and scientists, putting together a complete picture of how milk hormones work. When people go to their jobs, they do their tasks and then leave the workplace and go home. They have hundreds or thousands of different assignments over a 2-year period. I had one. They went home for a weekend. I worked 7 days per week. I read and studied and analyzed data. The approval of the genetically engineered milk hormone was the most controversial in the history of the Food and Drug Administration. 55,000 pages of research submitted by Monsanto overwhelmed the FDA reviewers. Monsanto invested $500 million in developing this new drug and food additive. I became the one person in America to meet with the FDA on the scientific merits of this controversy, and on April 21st, 1995, I was invited to the Center for Veterinary Medicine, FDA's investigative branch, to discuss these controversial issues with FDA scientists. In college, I enjoyed reading scientific papers. In order to be current with the latest research, one must keep up with scientific journals. Many researchers, doctors, and activists protested the research and questioned the numerous contradictions in the scientific data that were published by FDA. There were also conflicts of interest between FDA and the drug's manufacturer. The conflicts resulted in a congressional request for an investigation, but the subsequent recommendations made to Congress were ignored. In addition, cows treated with these new hormones were getting sick. The milk contained more hormones and increased levels of bacteria. Calves birthed to the cows were born with genetic deformities. FDA withheld much of the data from investigators despite Freedom of Information Act requests. 4 dedicated nonconformists protested the decision to approve the new hormone. Each one was a true American hero. They included Pete Harden, editor of the dairy industry newsletter, The Milkweed, and Sam Epstein, cancer researcher and author of numerous books and scientific articles, and Michael Hansen, scientist, writer, and lecturer for the Consumers Union, publisher of Consumers Reports. Rounding out the foursome was Dr. William Von Meyer, president of Fairview Industries, a firm conducting biochemical and genetic research. I spoke to these men, each and every one an acknowledged and respected authority in his field regarding the subject of milk and/or genetic engineering. In order to balance my education and make an unbiased judgment, I also called the Monsanto Agricultural Company and was directed to speak with Robert Collier. Collier was friendly and obviously well-versed on all of the issues. This well-published scientist and spokesman for Monsanto offered to send me a package of scientific studies, and I accepted his offer. The next day, a large priority mail package was delivered to my home. I related 4 major areas that troubled me. These were no small concerns. I asked, was BST improperly tested? Did BST cause serious problems to cows? Were additional levels of antibiotics found in the milk because sick cows had to be doctored to combat increased occurrences of mastitis? Was there an increased risk of cancer to users of dairy products containing this new genetically engineered hormone? Collier explained that the Board of Education of the Chicago school system considered this controversy in contemplating a ban on milk from cows treated with this hormone. He offered to send me the same studies and papers which Chicago had used to decide that the new milk was as safe as wholesome milk and indistinguishable from the milk of untreated cows. I carefully reviewed those papers, which arrived the next day by special messenger. The first document I reviewed was a paper published in the Cadillac of scientific journals. In order to end the debate surrounding the genetically engineered milk hormone, FDA published an article in the journal Science. This August 24, 1990 paper was intended to end the BST controversy. Instead, it added fuel to the fires of protest. Each of the documents supplied by Monsanto's Collier relied upon data and facts contained in the Science article. This FDA paper was the landmark document to which all other agency reports referred. Thorough understanding of this article is critical to understanding the issues. This was not easy reading, so to my desk I went, armed with calculator, to interpolate the data. My background allowed me to read through and understand it in about 3 days. This was challenging to me. Laypersons in the Chicago school system trying to grasp the complex scientific issues would find the terminology and complexities of the science paper nearly impossible. Yet they had a vital decision to make affecting the health and futures of thousands of students. The journal Science. A press release from the peer-reviewed journal Science reveals that each weekly issue is read by an estimated 500,000 persons. The magazine was established by Thomas Edison in 1880. Articles appearing in this journal represent the leading edge of scientific inquiry and research, and these articles are reviewed before publication by experts in the related subject field. The reviews are supposed to be independent of any conflicts of interest, and their identities are kept confidential. Once the articles are published, the information is laid bare to 500,000 other reviewers consisting of the world's scientific community. Science is found in libraries, schools, and research facilities. Often, publication of an article in Science is of such importance to a researcher that it can guarantee academic success and establish a reputation. FDA's motivation to publish in Science. FDA assigned the task of reviewing and summarizing the BST research to 2 FDA employees, Judy Juskovich, Ph.D., and Greg Ryer, Ph.D. These 2 scientists immortalized their names in the scientific community by writing a paper to which all others referred. Although this paper was accessible to 500,000 readers and is now available in the archives of most of America's libraries, there are many who would prefer not to see it in print in its entirety. Had I written this paper for a high school biology class, I probably would have failed. Not only were references incorrectly cited, but conclusions were incorrectly reached. Very few of Science's readers detected these errors. Only a handful of critics saw anything wrong, and of that small group, none recognized that wholesome milk also contained the same powerful and dangerous growth hormones. Fraud was shaped in the world's most respected journal by a government agency, and the scientific community was asleep. As a result of this paper, Monsanto was granted approval for BST. FDA Commissioner David Kessler and other FDA employees testified before congressional committees to a number of conclusions that were outright lies. The greatest lie told by FDA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the National Institutes of Health, the World Health Organization, and repeated by dozens of scientific agencies, thousands of newspapers and magazines was, genetically engineered milk is identical to untreated milk. To list every reference to this lie would be to catalog every newspaper in America. Like the bold writing etched into the pedestals of monuments, this conclusive statement was imprinted into the collective consciousness of America. Genetically altered milk was exactly the same as wholesome milk. Yet, even in the abstract and introduction and synopsis of the paper, the authors told the truth in revealing that the 2 milks were different. Juskovich and Dyer wrote the following, quote, BST treatment produces an increase in the concentration of insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1, in cow's milk, unquote. The critics linked this hormone in milk to breast cancer. Genetic engineering produced more of this hormone in milk. FDA concluded that there was no difference, contradicting their own article. Papers published in scientific journals are meant to be shared and meticulously critiqued by the entire scientific community. In theory, a scientist in Great Britain or Kathmandu should be able to replicate the published studies of research performed in the United States and end up with similar results. Therefore, experimental data in support for scientific arguments must be available for review, especially if conclusions are drawn, and the authors expect these conclusions to be given credibility. Many scientists are from the good state of Missouri, and if another scientist is bold enough to make a conclusion, it better be prepared with data to answer upon demand a petition to show me. After reading the Juskovich and Dyer paper, I had many concerns, so I went to FDA and Monsanto and I said, show me. That's where the real game began. The response was, we do not have to show you. We are insulated and protected by law to the secrecy of our data. You'll never see it. As a scientist, I was offended, then outraged. I felt that I had every moral and ethical right to examine the raw data. I wasn't interested in learning trade secrets. I wanted to know the actual weights of 32 different tissue and organ samples from 360 animals in just one experiment. I wanted 11,520 pieces of raw data so that I could perform rigorous statistical analyses and either confirm or reject the conclusions of the scientists. How could they logically deny me access to these data? It took me 1 year to learn just how they would deny access to that data. My requests were denied. Then formal Freedom of Information Act requests were denied. I made an appeal to the Department of Health and Human Services, and that was denied. I then filed a suit in federal court, and that also proved unsuccessful in yielding the data. The United States was not concerned with a food additive that caused cancer in laboratory animals. They were concerned only with protecting the rights of companies manufacturing these poisons. FDA said many things with which I disagreed. That led to our meeting at the Center for Veterinary Medicine, FDA's scientific and investigative branch in Rockville, Maryland, on April 21st, 1995. At that meeting, the FDA scientists unanimously agreed that milk proteins are destroyed in the stomach and rendered harmless, inactivated by digestive enzymes. I asked them, do you scientists believe that a nursing mother passes nothing on to her infant child? No hormones, no immunological factors? They put together the collective scientific intellect and responded, perhaps nursing offers some psychological and nurturing benefit, but nothing more. Protein hormones are made up of simple amino acids. A map can be made of each hormone. As part of their 55,000-page application to FDA, Monsanto was required to and did submit a chart identifying every amino acid on the 191 amino acid chain structure of BST. On that chart, amino acid number 144 was represented as being lysine. It was not. Monsanto had made a mistake. During the gene transcription process, a freak amino acid was created. A Monsanto scientist, Bernard Violin, published evidence of this mistake in the July 1994 issue of the Journal of Protein Science. The mistake resulted in the production of a substance unlike the naturally occurring bovine protein. Amino acid number 144 lysine was incorrectly transcribed as a freak amino acid called epsilon N-acetylysine. Shades of Jurassic Park, shades of Frankenstein. Monsanto had created a frankenfood. FDA allowed that food to enter our food supply. Monsanto has never officially admitted this error. I called Richard Teskey, Ph.D., the hands-on director of research at CVM, in May of 1995, and told him of this error. I reminded Teskey that one amino acid difference produces conditions such as sickle cell anemia or Alzheimer's disease. This error compromised all of the research performed and submitted to FDA. The Monsanto publication revealed that the error was discovered and a process developed which filtered out the freak amino acid. Unfortunately for Monsanto, $500 million worth of research was invalidated. Fortunately for Monsanto, they had friends in high places. They had friends at FDA. Microbiologists are aware that one amino acid difference in a protein can result in hundreds of known diseases. The FDA does not believe that protein hormones survive digestion, so they relieved Monsanto from the responsibility of performing further toxicology studies. When I met with FDA scientists, they repeated a very important given, which was accepted by all men of science. Here's what FDA believes. When we eat food, pepsin, hydrochloric acid, and other strong digestive enzymes act upon the food, rendering any protein hormone inactive. These scientists were amazed that I couldn't understand this basic precept of science. On the other hand, I was astonished that these men of science were so stubbornly pig-headed that they could not see how easily these protein hormones actually did survive digestion. I said, if I hold out my hand and it contains a little red pill with 3,000 nanograms of the most powerful growth hormone in your body and offer it to you, would you swallow that pill? A nanogram is equal to 1 billionth of a gram. Many chemical messengers function on a very tiny scale called the nanomolecular level. Most people understand that minute quantities of chemicals such as the hallucinogenic substance LSD, also work on a nanomolecular level. The scientists laughed at my question. Of course, they would not be foolish enough to take a pill containing the most powerful growth hormone in the human body. And that was a given. Yet, I continued, the hormones in that pill would not work. They would certainly be destroyed by the acid in your stomach. So would those same hormones contained in the steak or hamburger. They are naturally destroyed. Everybody agreed with me. Now for the milk. When you drink a glass of milk, what happens? I paused for effect. I'll tell you what happens. The milk mixes with everything inside of your stomach. There's acid and there's mucus and undigested food. It's a complex and heterogeneous soup. Before drinking the milk, the pH scale, or the level of acidity in the gastric environment, is between a 1.8 and a 2.0. That's very acid. After drinking a 12-ounce glass of milk, the gastric environment changes. The acid becomes weaker. The milk has a buffering effect. The gastric environment and everything contained in the stomach now has a pH of 6. That's not so acid. And what happens to a 6? No answer came from the scientists. Nearly 4 months later, I received a letter from Teskey. He wrote that at a pH of 6, bovine proteins encapsulated in fat molecules are protected from degradation by gastric juices. This is not surprising, since pepsin is virtually inactive at a pH of 6. Teskey admitted that proteins which would normally be destroyed in the stomach are protected by milk. Milk changes the stomach's acidity, buffering it from an acidic 1.8 to a more basic 6.0. Medical science does not yet realize the significance and implications of this observation. Milk is loaded with hormones to promote growth. They survive digestion because milk itself acts as an enzyme inhibitor, buffering the acid in the stomach and changing the acidity by decreasing it from a very acidic 1.8 to a more neutral 6.0. FDA ignored this and falsely explained that protein hormones are destroyed. The amino acid sequence differences between normally occurring BST and genetically engineered BST were known to FDA. How could they write that those two proteins were biologically indistinguishable? Lies, lies, and more lies. Our bodies are made up of trillions of cells. These cells communicate with each other by a combination of weak electrical impulses and by various chemical messengers or hormones. The word hormone constitutes diversified meanings for different people. To teenagers with acne, it's the cause of all pimples. To the husband of a pregnant woman desiring pickles and ice cream, experiencing mood swings, it's the foundation of her behavior patterns. To gang members who fight to defend a street corner as their turf, it's the chemical that brings about aggressive behavior. To a weightlifter or Olympic athlete, it's the way to illegally grow muscles quickly. To an animal psychologist studying wolf behavior, a hormone is a chemical messenger that causes a fixed action pattern in the brain, eliciting the course of action in which a male will mark bushes and declare his territorial rights. Nobody instructs a male dog on how to mount a female and conduct himself in a manner as to reproduce his species. He does not read such advice in a book, and he does not watch a movie. A chemical hormone called a pheromone creates an odor which, when inhaled, affects the male dog's brain in such a manner that he performs the same act done by generations of his ancestors. Chemical and physiological processes are so linked in the brains of all mammals. Steroid hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone are responsible for a vast array of behaviors. Body organs secrete these chemical messengers at varied times for a multitude of purposes. There are other hormones which control miscellaneous body functions. One is called epinephrine, better known as adrenaline. Adrenaline is the powerful hormonal messenger that alerts humans to dangerous situations. When adrenaline is secreted into the bloodstream by the adrenal glands, animals, including humans, experience the fight-or-flight response. One other group of hormones works on cellular processes. Quite often, the effects of these hormones are not readily observed. Chemical messengers or hormones usually work on very specific cells or parts of cells. They first must find an area on a cell to which they can attach or bind. Nicotine, the active substance in tobacco, is a messenger. So is heroin. Both of these chemicals work by attaching to very specific areas or groups of cells in a tiny organ located in the brain. This organ is about the size of a thumbnail. It's called the hypothalamus. Within the hypothalamus, there is an area known as the median forebrain bundle, where heroin and nicotine both work. Many scientists refer to the median forebrain bundle as the addiction center. On a microbiological level, these chemical messengers attach to cells. This process of attachment has been referred to as binding. The area of the cell in which a chemical attaches is referred to as a binding site. Each chemical is different and each site is different. An analogy can be made to illustrate this process as being similar to the way a key fits into a lock. One key will not open up every lock. A specific key, or in this case, hormone, can fit into a specific lock, and in this case, a binding site, and open up a specific action or response. Scientists enjoy talking at a level way above laypersons. They discuss chemicals and samples in milliliters, which are 1,000th of a liter. A liter of milk is approximately the size of a quart. Nobody consumes 1,000th of a liter, a thimbleful of milk. Accordingly, there are 3,300 nanograms or units of BST in normal wholesome milk. When a cow is injected with RBST, the resulting milk then contains 4,200 units. Subtracting 3,300 from 4,200, we arrive at a difference of 900 units. That difference, 900, divided by the level of normal milk, 3,300, reveals an increase of more than 26%. When you give a cow a shot of genetically engineered bovine growth hormone, her milk will contain a 26% increase in the level of her growth hormone. FDA says there is no significant increase. Why does FDA want America to believe that 26% is not a significant increase? Which container would you drink? The one with 3,300 units or the one with 4,200 units? I hope you select a bottle of water or orange juice or even soda instead. FDA has committed one of the greatest scientific frauds in the history of mankind. They left the evidence plain as day and nobody caught on. Besides the obvious conspiracy, there is a recompounding of conspiracies here, and the conspiracy of ignorance. There have been throughout our history instances of scientific fraud that were perpetrated upon mankind for a variety of reasons. Academic pressures can be enormous. Financial pressures are great motivators. It's easy to explain and understand why scientists sometimes cheat. They're only human. Gregor Mendel, the father of genetics, actually cheated. Mendel, a monk, crossbred peas by mixing their pollens and altering their characteristics. He kept a journal which, when analyzed, revealed data that were too perfect for what probably occurred in nature. In order to prove that genetically engineered milk was safe to drink, FDA said that when milk is pasteurized, most of the hormones are destroyed. This was not true, but even the FDA Commissioner, David Kessler, repeated this lie to a congressional committee. Justovich and Dyer attributed the 90% destruction citation to reference number 47 of their paper. Upon review of the references, that would be J.A. Moore's publication in the Journal of Endocrinology. A few months after first reading this portion of the Justovich and Dyer paper, I received a copy of Moore's paper. There was no mention of pasteurization and 90% destruction of BST. Was it possible that Justovich and Dyer made this up or miscited the reference? The same reference appeared in numerous reports from prestigious agencies like the Journal of the American Medical Association and like the World Health Organization and the National Institutes of Health. Could 500,000 readers of science have also missed this? Nah. After hundreds of hours of review, I discovered that Moore was incorrectly cited. The study was actually performed by another researcher, Paul Groenewegen. Today, Groenewegen is a swine specialist for the Ralston Purina Company in Guelph, Ontario. When his study was accepted by the American Institute of Nutrition in 1989, Paul was an undergraduate student at the University of Guelph. Groenewegen's co-authors were Brian McBride, John Burton, and Ted Alsasser. McBride and Burton have a long history of working closely with Monsanto, having published numerous papers together underwritten by Monsanto research dollars. Many papers have been co-published with Monsanto's chief cow researcher, Dale Bauman of Cornell University. Scientists often reveal the relationships with each other by publishing papers together. Oh, the paper trails these men and women of science leave behind them. These three published one such paper together, sponsored by the International Dairy Federation in 1994. Alsacer was employed by the United States Department of Agriculture. He also has close ties to Monsanto and has published with Hammond, a Monsanto scientist, who published papers with Robert Collier, another Monsanto scientist and spokesman. McBride has strongly supported the introduction of the genetically engineered hormone to Canada. Monsanto, the dairy industry, the paid scientists, and USDA are all members of one big happy family. I spoke to Paul Groenewegen asking him to take responsibility for his paper. His response was that the data from his study stand on their own exactly as they were published, and he is not responsible for the actions of FDA. Groenewegen tried very hard to demonstrate that pasteurization or heat treatment destroyed BST in milk. This was important to Monsanto. Groenewegen heated his milk for 30 minutes at 71 degrees centigrade. The fraud. In his publication, Groenewegen informs us of the correct protocol for heating and pasteurizing milk. USDA calls for milk to be pasteurized at 72 degrees centigrade for 15 seconds, not 30 minutes. We may never know why Groenewegen heated his milk samples for 30 minutes at 71 degrees centigrade. Groenewegen's exaggerated method was designed to destroy all traces of the genetically engineered bovine hormone. Even with the high heat for 30 minutes, his attempt to destroy the BST failed. The data reveal that Groenewegen destroyed only 19% of the BST in milk. He could not destroy the hormone. That must have been his mission. Why else would they heat the milk for 30 minutes at a high temperature reserved for a 15-second heat treatment? What he did next demonstrates the desperation of a devious plan gone wrong. He then spiked the milk. That is his word, spike. He added artificial BST to the milk and heated it again. Then, amazingly, he added 146 times the level of powdered BST to the milk and heated it. The powdered BST in the milk was destroyed. That saved the day for Monsanto. The experiment worked. These men of science could claim that heat treatment destroyed BST. In their concluding discussion, these scientists determined that heat treatment effectively reduced the immunoreactive quantities of BST in milk. Their data indicated otherwise. Milk from BST-treated cows contains 26% more BST than milk from untreated cows. Jeskovich and Goya wrote that BST treatment was, quote, not expected to cause an increase of biological significance to humans, unquote. This is the way scientists use statistics to mislead. Judy Jeskovich and Greg Goddard were selected to write the FDA paper that would end the controversies surrounding the genetically engineered bovine hormone. Scientific fraud has never passed inspection by so many members of the scientific community. The American public would have no idea of the deception. Monsanto would have succeeded in their crime. That would have been a national tragedy. When Monsanto's RBST animal drug application was finally approved by FDA, the agency included this warning on the label. Use of the product has also been associated with increased cystic ovaries and disorders of the uterus in cows during the treatment period. Treated cows are at an increased risk of clinical mastitis and subclinical mastitis. In some herds, use has been associated with increases in somatic cell counts in milk. Use may result in an increase in digestive disorders such as indigestion, bloat, and diarrhea. Cows treated with this product may have increased numbers of enlarged hocks and lesions of the knee, and second lactation or older cows may have more disorders of the foot region. Use has been associated with reductions in hemoglobin and hematocrit values during treatment. When a hormone doesn't function properly, an abnormal condition results. For example, diabetes can be an indication that the pancreas is not producing enough insulin to metabolize sugar. Less than 30 years ago, a powerful growth hormone was identified in the milk of cows. Subsequently, that same hormone has been identified in humans. Variations of that growth hormone have also been identified in hundreds of animal species. The actual date of discovery was never recorded. This hormone was similar to, but not exactly like insulin. The hormone made cells grow. Since it resembled insulin and made cells grow, it was called insulin-like growth factor. There are at least 5 different types of insulin-like growth factors, but here we concern ourselves primarily with insulin growth factor 1, or IGF-1. IGF-1 works on an extremely tiny scale, the molecular level. It does not take a lot of IGF-1 to exert cellular growth effects. Other chemicals work the same way. A tiny amount of LSD would create powerful hallucinations for anybody experiencing an LSD trip. Hormones are made up of amino acids. Amino acids are building blocks of proteins. There are approximately 28 different amino acids that make up the hundreds of known proteins in the human body. Other species of animals have hormones that are similar to, but not exact in structure to human hormones. There is one exception. IGF-1, the most powerful growth hormone in the human body, is identical between bovines and humans. IGF-1 in both cows and people contains 70 amino acids in the same exact gene sequence. If somebody were to offer you that pill containing the most powerful growth hormone in the human body, would you take that pill? Every time you drink a 12-ounce glass of milk, you ingest the same amount of this growth hormone. Would you imagine that IGF-1 works on a nursing calf? Of course it does. Why would you not then assume that IGF-1 in milk has the potential to exert a powerful influence on human cellular activity? The domino effect, how FDA misled America. The FDA reviewed Monsanto's research. Then the Government Accounting Office reviewed FDA's review. After that, the National Institutes of Health reviewed FDA and GAO, and the Office of Technology Assessment reviewed FDA, GAO, and NIH. And of course, the Journal of the American Medical Association reviewed FDA, NIH, GAO, OTA, and before this controversy became total alphabet soup, the World Health Organization reviewed everybody else's work. How could so many intelligent scientific minds representing these most prestigious scientific organizations make the same exact mistakes? In order to clear the confusion and end the controversy, FDA published for the first time in their history that review of the research concerning BST. Simultaneous to FDA science publication, 2 other scientific journals, JAMA and Science News, endorsed the new genetically engineered milk hormone. This endorsement was written and published before the publication of the science article. The verdict, previously decided, was in. Each report contained contradictions and falsehoods. After formal approval on November 5, 1993, a 3-month moratorium was placed on actual BST use until the White House had the opportunity to issue their own report. FDA published their article on Friday, August 24, 1990, and on August 22nd, 2 days earlier, the Journal of the American Medical Association jumped the gun and published their endorsement of FDA's conclusions. A third journal, Science News, published news of the JAMA endorsement of the science article just 1 day after the science article appeared. These Science News writers must have been working through Friday night, writing, editing, and rolling the presses so that their story could be printed the following day. JAMA raised their glass of milk and collectively said, "We'll drink to that." The JAMA article and the Science News article appeared the same week as did the science article. Somebody was pulling the strings. JAMA, representing America's doctors, is respected for independent, unbiased review of medical issues. Why then did they accept a paper authored by 2 doctors with economic ties to Monsanto? Is there a doctor in the house? The AMA, recognizing that this controversy had to be handled with surgical gloves, assigned the task to 2 independent doctors. One was David Barbano, who had previously been hired by the Dairy Coalition to conduct a seminar on BST safety. Paper trails. Thank goodness for researchers who must see their names in print. These scientists document their relationships with other scientists by publishing articles with their colleagues. Names appearing together are smoking guns, testimony to the vain and the foolish. Dale Bauman, the scientist at Cornell, who worked for Monsanto and published dozens of articles with their scientists, also published a paper with David Barbano, the co-author of the so-called independent JAMA article. Barbano was not an independent author writing for JAMA. In 1988, Barbano and Bauman published an article on the influence of BST on milk composition. A not-so-independent co-author. Dr. William Daugaday had Monsanto connections too. The JAMA reviewer added a review, an addendum to the paper, revealing that from 1984 to 1986, Daugaday was the recipient of a research contract with Monsanto, a portion of which was paid to him as a consulting fee. Monsanto's memo, 5 independent authorities have found BST-treated milk to be indistinguishable from normal milk. The JAMA authors downplay the significance of genetic engineering. Although Monsanto incorrectly translated the genetic code and created an entirely new hormone never before seen on the face of this planet, with a bacterium amino acid in the number 144 position, epsilon N-acetylysine, replacing the normal lysine, the authors argue that genetic engineering is no big deal. They write in JAMA, quote, "Bovine somatotropin is simply another milk production management tool that could be made available to the dairy farmer," unquote. Yeah, right? And hydrogen bombs is simply another defensive management tool for our armed forces. Examples of other management tools mentioned in the preceding paragraph of the JAMA article are enriched feeds, vitamins, improved sanitation, computerized ration balancing, and record keeping and better milk cooling and handling systems. These authors compare genetic engineering to the other methods and state this will help the dairy farmer produce milk at a lower cost, and lower milk production costs will ultimately benefit consumers. Well, milk prices were increased 14% in California shortly after Monsanto's BST was approved. The Powerful Dairy Coalition is continuously lobbying Congress to increase milk prices. The consumer's interests are not a consideration of this coalition. As to BST-related milk being indistinguishable from normal milk, the doctors write, "The minor differences in milk composition shown between unsupplemented and BST-supplemented cows are well within normal biological variation in milk composition." We trust doctors. We believe the Journal of the American Medical Association. When Science and JAMA ran their articles simultaneously, JAMA comments received more weight by the media. Science gave us their opinion, and America's physicians gave us an unqualified second opinion. BST-treated milk is wholesome and safe. Nobody was there to tell us that the independent JAMA investigators had received money from Monsanto. In the company of such overwhelming confirmation, the doctors had nothing to fear. Nobody would ever uncover the true facts. They nearly got that one right. There were other medical opinions, not so well publicized, that tried to alert the public. Dr. Benjamin Spock announced that cow's milk is inappropriate for children below the age of 1 because they react negatively to bovine hormones. In the years preceding his death, Dr. Spock created quite a controversy by criticizing milk. After 50 years of telling parents that milk was a near-perfect food, Spock made a 180-degree turn. After his analysis, the American Academy of Pediatrics re-examined milk issues and withdrew their endorsement of whole cow's milk for infants. Dr. Neil Bernard, author of Food for Life and director of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, made stronger statements. Bernard believes that consumption of cow's milk is totally inappropriate for humans. The scientific literature is filled with evidence of the inadequacy of cow's milk for human nutrition. According to Bernard, there is no nutritional requirement for dairy products, and there are serious problems that can result from the proteins, sugar, fat, and contaminants in milk products. Harvey and Marilyn Diamond, authors of the bestsellers Fit for Life and Living Health, are strong opponents of milk consumption. They make a remarkable case against dairy products, and their comments on the dairy industry are brilliantly presented. The Diamonds conclude that dairy products are disease-producing. Pasteurization is a fraud because dead food cannot support life. Everything that you have been taught about calcium in milk is inaccurate and dishonest. Dairy products are a major cause of osteoporosis. Their books were on the New York Times bestseller list for 2 consecutive years. If all of the readers of the Diamond's books had heeded the author's advice, we would have no dairy industry. What you learn here will put a final nail in the dairy industry coffin. The Journal of the American Medical Association once had an immaculate reputation. Then they started to play politics. A review of PAC donations revealed that in 1994, the AMA gave nearly $3 million to various members of Congress. The AMA will not publicly comment on their political donations, records of which are kept on file by the Federal Election Commission. In the same year that Monsanto published a revealing article admitting a gene error in producing BST, JAMA said that they were baffled by an explosion of increased cancer rates. JAMA suggested that unknown carcinogens, perhaps environmental, yet to be identified, have been introduced over the past 50 years. The JAMA report was particularly concerned about an increase in tumors among farmers. Some studies refer to an increased level of leukemia among dairy farmers. Medical school, a place where doctors learn that when they drop the scalpel, they are not supposed to say, oops. A place where a class called Malpractice 401 is more important to a practitioner's education than Nutrition 101. Doctors learn to diagnose and prescribe. They do not understand the words of the great 20th century philosopher Tiny Tim, who informed his adoring public that, quote, you are what you eat, unquote. If you consume the same daily levels of dairy products eaten by the average American, you eat the equivalent fat of 11 slices of bacon, the equivalent cholesterol contained in 53 slices of bacon, and enough hormones to ignite the processes which break the tight genetic controls which your immune system has most likely placed on an existing cancer. Ready to light the fuse? Drink that glass of milk. All of the prestigious scientific agencies and government offices repeated the same lie. This was science and industry and government's way of teaching us. In 1994, this is the method in which we were bombarded with information extolling the virtues of milk. Television was filled with not-so-subtle ads of actresses and athletes with milk mustaches evading our primetime viewing pleasures. Full-page promos in every major magazine displayed those cute milk stashes on the lips of beautiful models. Repeated radio and newspaper exposure told us that genetically engineered milk and normal wholesome milk were indistinguishable. This is the same way that Goebbels, Hitler's minister of popular enlightenment, brainwashed the residents of Berlin into believing that their capital city was not under siege when Allied forces were dropping bombs on their heads. Well, we are under siege too. With bombs, we can hide in the basement. Sometimes explosives miss their mark. Milk is a different matter. Drink BST milk, and the hormones will find a way to hit their target. The White House report's summary included the following points. Point number 1, quote, BST-treated milk is safe because it is indistinguishable from normal milk, unquote. Well, we know that BST-treated milk and untreated milk are different. That must logically change the conclusion of point number 1. If we assume that BST-treated milk is safe because it is indistinguishable from non-BST milk, then the converse must be true. BST milk is unsafe because it is different from non-BST milk. Point number 2, quote, income for individual farmers who use BST is likely to increase because BST favors good herd management, unquote. Well, not for the 500 farms and 9,500 animals reported with mastitis, a condition of ulcerations and sores to the udders of cows. This problem results in pus entering the milk, which increases milk's bacterial cell count. Many animals had to be destroyed. Many more farmers experienced no problems. Those who were successful produced more milk. The government, using our tax dollars, purchases milk surplus. We had a large milk surplus before BST came on the market. We will have an even larger milk surplus now. When they say income for most farmers will increase, point number 3, quote, BST will lead to lower milk prices, unquote. Milk prices are fixed and controlled. Milk producers are under a microscope and cannot lower or raise their prices. However, the dairy industry had their lobbyists working hard to release those controls so that prices would be free to increase simultaneous to BST approval and their brilliantly marketed media blitz. Point number 4, quote, lower milk prices would result in decreased federal costs for food stamps and other supplemental food programs, unquote. I don't know who wrote this report, but as it comes from the White House, I must assume President Clinton had to be aware of it. Doesn't the buck stop on his desk? Hey, Mr. President, you're pushing it here. You've lost credibility and you're sinking even deeper. You want us to believe that public welfare costs will decrease because we allow Monsanto the right to distribute a genetically engineered hormone that causes cancer to laboratory animals and makes the milk different? You're pulling my leg, aren't you? Milk prices have increased since BST approval. This has added costs to all of the above programs. Guess who is paying the price? Point number 5, quote, federal dairy price support program would increase by approximately $150 million per year and decline in later years, unquote. That contradicts all of the previous points about lower prices. Don't they read what they write? The second part suggests costs will decline in later years. We've heard things like this before from politicians who promise us tax hikes for next year and then add, don't worry, taxes will decrease in later years. Point number 6. Savings in the costs of federal feeding programs will completely offset the cumulative cost of the federal dairy price support system over 10 years, unquote. Federal feeding programs? You mean to tell me that you guys feed their cows? The government subsidizes the milk, buys the surplus, gives tax breaks to companies doing research, designing chemicals to poison us, and feeds their animals. What's the point? Why not just pay the dairy farmers to come to Washington and sit at a desk just like the rest of your bureaucrats and do nothing? It would probably save us money, and we'd be a heck of a lot healthier. Point number 7. Consumers will benefit over the next 6 years with BST use because of lower prices, unquote. If you believe that one, I've got a bridge to sell to you. I'd like each American consumer to give me 1 penny saved from a quart of milk. That would be 260 million people times 1 cent equals 2,000,006. Give me 2,000,006 and I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. Point number 8, quote, no significant reduction of demand is expected to result from BST use. Some consumer surveys reveal resistance to BST milk, unquote. Here comes Big Brother. We need re-education? It's obvious who needs re-education, isn't it? If every American realizes that the new milk contains increased levels of hormones, will milk consumption increase or decrease? The next point is worthy of nomination for a very special classification. The category is the environment. This rates as one of the silliest things I have ever heard. Point number 9, quote, BST is expected to have a beneficial impact on the environment. It should lead to a slightly smaller U.S. dairy herd and therefore less pollution and less cow manure and methane production, unquote. This kind of manure is appropriate for something coming out of the executive office. Is cow manure bad? I certainly wouldn't want to step in it, but I buy a couple of bags every year for my small tomato garden. Does cow manure cause pollution? I don't know. As for methane, now they're finally beginning to make sense. After all, cows pass gas, and that smells bad. I wouldn't want to be in a closed room with my friends and a dairy cow, with everybody suddenly snickering and pointing at me. That could be embarrassing. Methane gas? Sure. That certainly affects me when cows in Wisconsin participate in communal flatulence. Or you can light up Hackensack, New Jersey with all the methane gas produced from those bovines breaking wind. Thank goodness our government scientists realize that fewer cows will mean less atmospheric disturbance. I wonder just how many federal dollars they spent to come up with the data for this conclusion. However, consider that BST-treated cows will eat more food to produce 20% more milk. If they don't eat more food, then they'll have to dissolve their own bones and melt their own protein to produce that 20% more milk product. So if they eat more, and you've got to assume that they will, then they're going to pass more gas. Perhaps the author of this study could get a job writing for Jay Leno or David Letterman. Point number 10, quote, BST should have little, if any, effect on U.S. dairy exports. Nearly half of U.S. dairy exports go to countries that have approved the use of BST, and more countries are expected to do so, unquote. I've got some very bad news for these guys. Shortly after this report was released, the European community placed a 7-year moratorium on the use of BST in their market. This not only invalidates point number 10, but helps to invalidate points 1 through 9 as well. This ban was done for safety reasons. The final point, number 11, quote, U.S. leadership in biotechnology as well as private sector investment for research and development in the biotechnology industry would be enhanced by proceeding with BST and would be impeded if there were new government obstacles to such biotech products following their approval for use by FDA and other regulatory agencies, unquote. In other words, if we determine that BST is not safe, we will hurt the prospects of the new genetic engineering technology. It has not yet been perfected. In Steven Spielberg's movie Jurassic Park, we become witness to a scenario where errors in genetic engineering cause horrible consequences. When just one amino acid in a hormone or protein differs from the normal genetic code, there can be dire consequences. With BST, proper research developed a product with a resulting gene transcription error. That error surfaced long after all of the research on BST had been performed and submitted to FDA. In the rush to get BST to market, sloppy research was tolerated. When lab animals became sick, the incriminating data were hidden. When requests were made for specifics proving laboratory animals got cancer from BST, the government, in its great display of bureaucratic strength, did not allow such data to be released. BST-treated milk is indistinguishable from normal milk, they said. Approval was based upon this assumption. The executive report revealed evidence of this lie by revealing, quote, there are slight variations in milk fat and milk protein content immediately after BST treatment. They also revealed, quote, the meat from BST-treated cows tends to have a lower fat content. A slight shift in the nitrogen fractions, including casein, whey protein, and non-protein nitrogen, has been observed, unquote. These have been clues to a puzzle not yet solved. Combined with the irrefutable fact that levels of IGF-1 in milk increase after cows are treated with BST, it is a crime for any government employee or public figure to attempt to convince Americans that their milks are indistinguishable. World Health Organization. The World Health Organization, or WHO, held a 10-day meeting in Geneva, Switzerland in June of 1992. The purpose of the meeting was an assessment of the residues of hormones created from the new biotechnology. 2 quotes were contained in the conference report, just 8 pages apart from one another. Taken together, these 2 sentences reveal the truth about BST's effect on milk and the lie in which a small group of Monsanto scientists, with assistance from a small group of FDA insiders, fooled the scientific community of the entire world. The first quote revealed, after somatable injection, somatable being another word for BST, mean IGF-1 levels in the treated animals are always higher than those found in the controls. 8 pages later, the second quote, ignoring the first, said, the most definitive and comprehensive studies demonstrate that IGF-1 concentrations are not altered after BST treatment. These 2 statements contradict each other. They came to Switzerland to get their act together. Like Swiss cheese, their credibility had been shut full of holes. The plot thickens, collusion between Monsanto, FDA, and Congress. The investigation of the genetically engineered milk hormone was an enormous puzzle, and each individual factor contributing to its approval was but a single clue, which, when added together, revealed the solution to a far greater puzzle. There were 3 critical questions to be answered, each one relating to the other. The first question was, after cows are treated with RBST, does their milk contain increased levels of IGF-1? The answer to that first question was yes. The second question was, is IGF-1 in milk bioactive does it exert growth effects? The answer to that second question was also yes. The third question was one that nobody wanted to ask. Not FDA, not the Journal of the American Medical Association, not even the anti-BST activists, certainly not the dairy farmers. The third question was, does normal, wholesome milk contain powerful growth hormones? The answer to this question is a Pandora's box which might never have been opened had not Monsanto genetically engineered the bovine growth hormone, beginning this controversy. Monsanto learned many of the answers to these questions. Perhaps that is why they had to have their scientists, Margaret Miller and Suzanne Sation, and their attorney, Michael Taylor, hired by FDA to carefully review and write the regulations and approval of their own research. Perhaps that too is why so many members of Congress became wealthy from PAC money. The most important study considered by the FDA reviewers in their science publication was not reviewed by FDA scientists and investigators. Although 2 of the 7 tables of the Juskovich and Dyer paper presented data from an unpublished study authored by Richard, O'Daglier, and Deslex, the FDA did not refer to that study as, quote, pivotal, unquote. Had FDA called that study pivotal, the data would have been released to the public for review after final approval. Despite Freedom of Information Act lawsuits, those data still remain top secret. Monsanto continues to receive trade-protected status from FDA for the weights of 32 organs and tissue samples from 360 laboratory animals. Monsanto claims that the release of these data will cause them financial harm. Monsanto's $500 million investment remains safe thanks to FDA's protective shield. Bribery. Bribery is defined as the act or practice of giving or accepting money or some other payment with the object of influencing an action or judgment. The application of influence to gain votes at a parliamentary hearing or other election. While we can hardly understand the motives of individuals or groups, or witness what goes on behind closed doors, one wonders what the AMA is doing handing thousands of dollars to individuals on the Dairy, Livestock, and Poultry Committee. There is a connection. Why did AMA hardly approve BST in the August 1990 issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association, simultaneous to the August 24, 1990 article in Science? Why? Because Monsanto gave the AMA money. That's right. Monsanto donated money to the AMA. In their journal, the AMA endorsed the new genetically engineered milk hormone. Money also found its way to congressmen voting in committee on BST issues. While the AMA donated a total of $53,406 to the congressmen on this committee willing to accept money, Monsanto gave only to a select few. 4 congressmen accepted those bribes directly from Monsanto. Harold Volcker, $2,000. Cal Dooley, $1,000. Steve Gunderson, $1,000. And Richard Palmer, $500. These men were voting on labeling issues impacting directly on Monsanto, yet they accepted the money. Who can we trust? In the fall of 1993, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, an organization consisting of more than 6,000 medical doctors, asked the question, why would the American Medical Association get involved in dairy politics? In answering that question, the Physicians Organization linked both the American Dietetic Association and the American Medical Association to Monsanto. Monsanto gave $30,000 to the AMA to fund a television program educating consumers into believing that milk treated with hormones is as healthy as untreated milk. Monsanto also gave $100,000 to the dietitians to run an education hotline with positive information about the bovine growth hormone. Margaret Miller's crime against America, the mastitis controversy. While performing her research at Monsanto, Dr. Miller observed that cows treated with BST developed ulcers on their udders. A group of FDA employees wrote a confidential letter to numerous members of the House of Representatives and the Senate complaining, and I quote, Miller arbitrarily cows using milk was 1 part per 100 million. After Miller arrived at FDA, she changed that number to 1 part per million. She increased by 100 times the amounts of antibiotics Americans could drink. The Center for Disease Control in Atlanta has issued memorandums alerting Americans that antibiotics no longer seem to work. 39% of our diet consists of milk and dairy products. These foods now can contain 100 times the levels of antibiotics as they once did. FDA changed those levels and continues to represent that antibiotics in milk are well within the limits. What they don't tell us is that they changed those limits. Not so wholesome milk. Dairy farms are not at all like the tranquil scenes depicted on the sides of milk containers. Cows are milk machines, and dairy management is big business. Yields per animal are carefully monitored, and animals that do not perform are culled from the herd and sold to the meat producer, where they eventually end up as fast food hamburgers. The dairy farmer's sole purpose is to get as much milk from his animals for as many years as possible. That also applies to the factory farms in which dairy cows go many months at a time, chained to a stall, while standing on a concrete floor inside of a barn. The dairy industry begins with a cow and a dairy farmer. Along the way are the drivers of trucks hauling 50,000 pounds of milk at a time to a processor. Farmers pay 15 cents for every 100 pounds of milk produced for an association. This association collects the money and uses the funds to achieve policies which are supposed to be in the best interests of that dairy farmer. Milk from one cow's production generates less than $100 in a year. Milk from 10 million cows generates hundreds of millions of dollars for the marketing arm of the dairy industry. Many of those dollars pay agencies to design brilliant advertising campaigns. Billboards across America with famous athletes sporting milk stashes attest to the success of that strategy. These dollars have also trickled up to people in power. The money goes to members of Congress and to senators and even to presidents of the United States. Milk prices are regulated by the government. Many people within the industry view payments to these regulators as the cost of doing business. Monsanto Agricultural Company devised a way to isolate the swarming bacteria surviving within human feces and gastrointestinal tracts. Taking those swarming germs, Monsanto added natural cow hormones and created a flock of bacteria able to recombine the natural hormone into a new product, which was a little bit different and a little bit more powerful than the naturally occurring bovine growth hormone. When injected into cows, this hormone would change milk. The consumption of this new genetically tampered milk would increase the risk of human cancer. The presumptuous let-them-eat bacteria. King David, who is given much of the credit for writing the Psalms, sang of the Monsanto Agricultural Company. In Psalm 119, which blesses those who follow the laws of God, we are warned in verse 85, the presumptuous have excavated pitfalls to get me, those who are not in accord with your law. Can you imagine those presumptuous Monsanto scientists carefully scraping, while holding their noses, of course, hordes of bacteria from human feces? Can you imagine them joking about creating new products for our food supply from this stuff? I would like to propose that we change the names of the new Monsanto hormones created by this process. BST, or bovine somatotropin, and IGF, or insulin growth factor, should hereafter be called somatotropic hormone insulin type, or simply SHIT. That would be appropriate. Then we could leave the health and safety debate for our religious leaders. Is eating SHIT kosher? Imagine a stone hippie drinking a tall glass of genetically engineered milk. Man, this is good SHIT. Americans eat hormones, fat, and cholesterol with their morning cereal and squirt a few drops into their first cup of coffee. Healthy breakfast? How about some yogurt? Your body is drug-free, but don't forget to bathe your cells with powerful growth hormones before leaving for the office. Lunch? A slice of pizza. A milkshake with your hamburger. Some ice cream for dessert. Milk, America's #1 food industry. There is as much fat in a glass of low-fat milk as there is in 3 slices of bacon. Osteoporosis? Milk is actually the culprit. Excess calcium is actually the real cause of osteoporosis. Drink milk and break bones. Cholesterol? Remember, each day the average American consumes the equivalent amount of cholesterol contained in 53 slices of bacon from milk and dairy products. Milk was designed for a purpose. That purpose is to enable an infant to receive nourishment, including hormones, that will direct and regulate growth. Enormous growth. A human infant will double his weight in 3 months. A cow will gain 500 pounds in just 6 months. Milk is a hormonal delivery system. It is an appropriate food for infants who must gain weight rather quickly. Such hormones are not appropriate for adults. Milk drinkers baited their systems with the right liquid containing fat, cholesterol, and hormones. The Watergate tapes, President Nixon was bribed. The transcript from one of the Watergate tapes made on March 23, 1971, reveals President Nixon carefully choosing his words for the men delivering an enormous bribe. If only the walls of the Oval Office could talk, what secrets they would reveal. Here, then, the transcript of President Richard M. Nixon's meeting with milk producers. Note how carefully our ex-president expresses his gratitude, aware that the tapes are rolling. I know that you are a group that are politically very conscious, and you're willing to do something about it. And I must say, a lot of businessmen and others don't do anything about it. And you do, and I appreciate that, and I don't have to spell it out. Here, on tape is a president receiving a bribe. Later on, after these milk producers have left, Nixon, alone with advisor John Connally, says, "They are tough political operatives. This is a cold political deal." Who is getting the money? Who is getting the price increases? Who is paying the bribe, and who is actually footing the bill? The dairy industry learned throughout the administrations of 4 presidents that they could buy presidential decisions with both legal and illegal cash contributions. They learned how they could buy the votes of members of congressional committees. They successfully bribed one secretary after another. They learned to avoid antitrust litigation, and they learned how to regulate price controls for their milk. Farmers pay 15 cents to this coalition for every 100 pounds of milk that they produce. That may sound just like pennies, but it all adds up. The USDA reports that 400 million pounds of milk are produced every single day. When the numbers are calculated, they run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. In 1967, Lyndon Johnson was still running for re-election, a decision which changed after $90,711 was invested in a Salute to the President book that was to be sold to help refinance that campaign. When Johnson announced his intention not to run, that ended all value to the book, which had already been printed. Who would pay for the book? As it turned out, favors were called in by Johnson, who knew where and how to get those bills paid. On March 29, 1967, the Johnson administration increased milk prices by 7%. The cost of living for the previous 12 months was under 3%. 3 invoices totaling $90,711 were paid by the Central Arkansas Milk Producers Association. They paid $30,250. The North Texas Producers Association, they paid $28,500. And the remaining $31,000 was paid by the Milk Producers Incorporated. Hubert Humphrey was another matter. Thousands of dollars in illegal donations were paid to Humphrey from Dairy Coalition sources. The New York-based ad agency, Lennon & Newell, billed the Humphrey campaign for services and then sent the invoices to the Associated Milk Producers. In the 1991 story, Consumers Union reported that the United States purchased the equivalent of 9 billion pounds of surplus milk from dairy producers in 1990. Why was it so important to produce more milk? Why did the dairy industry lobby for BST and higher milk prices? Who would be hurt by this insanity? At the same time that America was developing a hormone to make more milk and purchasing the surplus milk, which was flooding the market, we were all also paying more than $1.3 billion to dairymen to slaughter more than 1 million cows, which were producing this surplus. Dairymen were taught a valuable lesson by the Washington bureaucracy. By buying more cows to produce more milk, they would receive more subsidies. If we could genetically engineer a hormone that would yield even more milk, there would be greater subsidies. An article in National Review beautifully expressed the system which had been created. This article reviewed a book written by James Paine called The Culture of Spending: Why Congress Lives Beyond Our Means. The author points out the enormity of the Dairy Coalition lobbying effort. There is no anti-dairy coalition, no such counter-lobby. Some members of Congress only get one side of the story, a biased presentation. Paine wrote, "Direct personal contacts are important factors in the spending culture. The congressman has lunch with pro-spending lobbyists every day. He almost never has lunch with opponents of spending who politically can hardly be said to exist. The whole situation is terribly one-sided. Major scandals have thrust the dairy industry into the national spotlight. The last occurred during the Nixon White House years. Millions of dollars were donated to Nixon's election committee, which resulted in price controls for milk, which benefited the dairy industry." Milk consumption, a second opinion from the medical establishment. Doctors have little time nor inclination to analyze their patient's dietary or nutritional needs. Rarely does a doctor ask a patient what foods he or she eats. Temperatures and blood pressures are taken along with x-rays and blood analysis. Results of such clinical tests can be measured against charts containing statistical standards. A typical visit to a doctor's office often results in a long wait before seeing the doctor. More often than not, the patient is there seeking a diagnosis and cure for his particular ailment. The medical practitioner often writes a prescription for a medication and then makes arrangements for follow-up visits and reanalysis of symptoms. Doctors try to cure disease by eliminating the symptoms. They rarely seek the cause of the disease. Patients complaining of migraines or epileptic episodes are given EEGs and referred to neurologists. They are rarely asked whether they drink diet soda or use aspartame, both of which have been associated with headaches and seizures. Patients reporting mucus, earaches, and constant colds and congestive problems have blood work and chest x-rays. A doctor rarely explores the relationship between disease and possible reaction to casein in milk, one of nature's strongest glues. Food additives such as monosodium glutamate, or MSG, have caused terrible reactions in thousands of individuals. Sleep patterns have been interrupted because of digestive problems, while doctors rarely explore the specific foods being eaten. Alternative medical practitioners have long recognized the link between good diet and good health. Millions of people on planet Earth rely upon pharmacies that carry herbal remedies to cure illnesses, such as ginseng root and chamomile tea. Most Americans and their doctors look at such practice and custom with blighted hope and cynicism, unaware that many of America's pharmaceuticals are developed from herbs and rare plants found in the Amazon region or from the barks of rare trees. Recently, a few doctors have been exploring the connection between diet and human disease. Two of those doctors, Neil Bernard and Robert Grazian, have recognized that milk and dairy products represent an enormous contributory influence towards illness in America. In high school, young bright scholars become inspired to go to the best colleges where they pursue an undergraduate course of study concentrated in the sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, and calculus. If all goes well and the grades are superior to their fellow students, they might elect to go on to medical school. An intense course of study then follows. Anatomy, physiology, histology, one ology after another of intense memorization and study. Later on, these elite students intern in hospitals and one day become medical doctors. It takes dedication, motivation, and commitment to become a doctor. All doctors are not alike. Some have time to read one journal per week and some have time to read 20. Some work every day of the year and some vacation every other weekend. Some, not many, make house calls. Many doctors are so busy, their waiting rooms filled by patients seeking consultations for varieties of illness, but there is little time for anything for them to do but attend to their patients' immediate needs. Doctors diagnose and medicate. They are taught in medical school their proper role in our society. Nutrition often plays no role in their training. Doctor, should I drink milk, you ask? What knowledge do they base their response upon? Did they study about milk in medical school? Do they even think about the hormones or antibiotics, the fat or cholesterol, or even the bovine proteins which trigger allergies? Most doctors suggest that everybody should drink milk. An analysis. What is in milk? A sip of milk contains hundreds of different substances, each one having the potential to exert a powerful biological effect when taken independently of the others. Together, this bouillon of proteins and hormones and fat and cholesterol, virus and bacteria, pesticides with vitamin D added, combine to affect its user in ways that can never be fully understood. Milk. It's pure and it's white, just like refined sugar in a newly fallen blanket of January snow. Like a sparkling ray of light before it enters a prism. Like the syrupy thick liquid in a newly opened can of latex paint. Ask a child what color results from mixing all of the other colors together, and instinctively she'll answer black. She'll be wrong. Mix blue and green and yellow and red and thousands of other colors together, and you'll end up with white. Merge violet and indigo, blue and green, yellow, orange, and red lights together, and you'll end up with a pure beam of white light. And there's more. Don't forget infrared and ultraviolet light. You cannot see them, but they're part of the white light too. There are many things in milk you cannot see. Scientists believe that there are many things in milk that are yet to be discovered. There are so many different things contained in beautiful white milk whose look is an illusion and misleading. Milk is wholesome. Milk is pure. There's no need to inventory a list of ingredients on the side of a milk carton. Ingredients? Like pure wholesome milk, of course. Right? Wrong. When we pasteurize milk, we destroy the vitamins. We have to put back an artificial version of the vitamin D, which is destroyed by heat. So we put back vitamin D3. Most containers will not divulge vitamin D added. They'll ingeniously disclose milk, vitamin D, period. What is in milk? What do we drink in that glass of white liquid? What do we consume in our yogurt, our cheese, and our butter? Welcome to the world of heart disease. If your dairy intake is equal to the average American's, you are eating the same cholesterol contained in 53 slices of bacon every single day. Through milk, you've eaten the equivalent cholesterol contained in 19,345 slices of bacon per year. After 52 years, you've consumed the same amount of cholesterol contained in over 1 million slices of bacon. Doctors have no clue as to the cause of America's #1 killer, heart disease. Ask your medical practitioner if he or she would recommend that you eat 1 million slices of bacon over a lifetime. Protein. Milk has been called liquid meat. It contains the same amino acids and proteins as meat does. Weightlifters will stop at nothing to attain the perfect physique, and have now discovered that bovine hormones are powerful growth factors. 2 weightlifters actually injected themselves with Monsanto's bovine protein, according to an adverse reaction report obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. Weightlifters soon learned that genetically engineered versions of naturally occurring human and bovine IGF-1 were readily available from research labs. Athletes learned that this hormone, when injected, promoted muscular growth and weight gain. The best part about this hormonal treatment was that it was not detectable. Remember, IGF-1 in cows and humans is identical, 70 amino acids, same gene sequence. FDA allowed Monsanto to genetically engineer versions of these protein hormones without having the responsibility of developing a test for it. Therefore, there was no way to test an athlete for the presence of a hormone that normally occurs. In the Summer Olympics held in Atlanta in 1996, there was one female athlete, a swimmer from a European nation, who was repeatedly tested by Olympic officials for the presence of growth hormones. Her husband, a weightlifter, must have been aware of this therapy. It was common knowledge among weightlifters that the growth properties were incredible. New Scientist magazine quotes one weightlifting athlete who injected IGF-1 who said, quote, "I got ripped. It was really noticeable. I stay pretty lean most of the time, but this took it to a different level. Veins in my abs, that sort of thing," unquote. This European athlete's swimming performances improved so dramatically from the previous year's times that officials and fellow athletes suspected that something was terribly wrong. If the swimmer had been using IGF-1, she would never have tested positive because there is no test to determine genetically engineered IGF-1 from normal IGF-1. Officials tested her many times for the presence of other hormonal factors. There being no test for IGF-1, they could not detect its presence. More proteins. In 1877, a scientist identified and described a process to isolate 3 milk proteins: casein, lactobumin, and lactoglobulin. Today, at least 8 different types of casein have been identified, along with a group of whey proteins, which include lactoglobulins, lactobumins, and immunoglobulins. Endocrinologist Clark Grosvenor published a review of the known hormones and growth factors in milk for the Endocrine Society in 1982. Each sip of milk includes pituitary, hypothalamic, pancreatic, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal, gonadal, and gut hormones. The list does not include other important milk factors such as prostaglandins and neuropeptides. The bioactive substances taken from Grosvenor's paper include 7 pituitary hormones, 7 steroid hormones, 7 hypothalamic hormones, 9 gastrointestinal peptides, 6 thyroid and parathyroid hormones, 12 growth factors including IGF-1, and 11 other hormones for a grand total of 59 powerful hormones. All of this in your morning cereal. It still appears white and pure. Cow's milk contains a variety of proteins and protein hormones besides IGF-1. The functions of many of these bioactive substances are largely unknown and remain to be interpreted. In 1956, evidence of corticosteroids was discovered in cow's milk. Since that date, hundreds of other protein and steroid hormones, estrogen, progesterone, calcitonin, and many others have been detected in bovine milk. The most critically important piece of the milk puzzle was supplied by Klagsburn, who in 1978 determined that growth hormones in cow and human milk stimulated cellular growth. It took mankind thousands of years to realize that milk contained powerful growth hormones. Nearly 20 years after Klagburn's observation, we are still in denial that milk is an effective delivery system for powerful growth hormones. Insulin like growth factor 1, or IGF-1, has been called the key factor in the growth and proliferation of cancer in humans by more than one microbiologist and cancer researcher. IGF-1, the most powerful growth hormone in the human body, is identical to cow IGF-1. IGF-1 makes cells grow. You will not grow an extra finger and your earlobe will remain the same shape. If you drink milk, your belly might grow, but that's probably due to all the fat and calories in dairy products. Most organs and appendages of your body are genetically coded with restrictions so that they do not alter their basic configuration. There are, for the most part, built-in genetically determined limits on growth. Not true with cancer. The last thing a human adult body needs is a powerful growth hormone instructing cells to grow. Got milk? Then you've got hormones, and the hormones work. Large fat globules are not easily passed through the intestinal wall. However, homogenization reduces the size of the fat globules by evenly dispersing them throughout the milk when they are forced through a flying filter at pressures equal to 4,500 pounds per square inch. After homogenization, the fat molecules, which are now 1/10 their original size, are more resistant to digestion. If the FDA and Monsanto were correct in concluding that milk proteins cannot possibly pass through the stomach and intestines and survive, then there would not be any possibility of antibodies produced as a defense against these foreign invaders. However, 2 Connecticut cardiologists, Austin and Ross, detected antibodies to milk proteins. They credited these bovine proteins to the destruction of atrial tissue in their heart attack patients. Upon autopsy, their suspicions were confirmed. Cancer, the link between growth hormones and dairy consumption. A diagnosis of cancer can be a death sentence. Occasionally, a victim receives a reprieve by being cured through radiation treatment or traditional chemotherapies. Technology offers hope for a cure by leading-edge scientific techniques, including the use of interferons, or procedures still considered experimental research by FDA and not yet approved for use by the entire population. Often, alternative therapies are successful in halting the spread of a tumor. Sometimes cancers disappear entirely, after one or a combination of the above treatments are applied. Once a cancer is diagnosed, there is little emphasis placed upon how the individual got the cancer in the first place. The only significant issue becomes treatment and cure, not prevention. When a cell dies, the body has to make new cells to replace the old ones. Many substances or circumstances kill cells. Most of the body's cells are programmed to die and be replaced. The body is often invaded by chemicals or events that cause damage and increase cellular replication. What kills cells? Sunlight, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, microwaves, pollution, cigarette smoke, just to name a few. It is well accepted that cigarette smoking is one of the biggest contributors towards the development of lung cancer. Science has yet to describe the actual process of how cancers grow. The cancer is a mistake. Since it is the body's own mistake, the cancer is not attacked by the body's normal immune system. The cancer begins with just one cell. A cancerous liver cell or lung cell has something wrong in its code. It grows but does not retain the characteristics of the cell it is replacing. Instead, it just keeps growing and growing. In 3 months, that one cell doubles to become 2 cells. Every 3 months, the number of cells doubles. 3 months later, the 2 become 4. After 1 year, the cancer has 16 cells. After 2 years, the cancer has 256 cells. In 5 years, the cancer can be 1 million cells strong. The actual cancer may not be detected for many years to come. The cancer may at some time stop growing. We have very tight and remarkable genetic controls that sometimes keep cancers from growing. Every single cancer that has ever grown in every human so diagnosed has one thing in common. Every cancer relies upon the most powerful growth hormone in the human body for its growth. That hormone is IGF-1. Insulin-like growth factor does not cause cancer. It simply allows existing cancers to grow. Those existing cancers were caused by one event, and one event only, an error in cellular replication. Cigarette smoke does not contain IGF-1. Neither do dioxins or plutonium. These toxins can cause cancer by killing cells and making new replication necessary. But in order for cancer to grow, there must be IGF-1. Without IGF-1, the growth hormone, there is no cancer. We manufacture IGF-1 in our bodies. We also consume IGF-1 in all dairy products. In milk, there are a number of elements which protect this hormone. Casein, which is milk's glue, is one protective element. Another is the process of homogenization, which creates more fat molecules and makes them smaller. These fat molecules carry IGF-1 from milk through the stomach and gut into the bloodstream, where they can circulate through the human body to exert powerful growth effects. Are there links between breast cancer and dairy products? Little has been written in popular magazines about the dairy cancer connection. Popular magazines rely upon advertising revenue from the dairy industry. However, the scientific literature is filled with such references linking dairy consumption with cancer. Most doctors have observed no connection. For those who have, they link the high levels of fat and cholesterol in milk to cancer. Many doctors received their training before IGF-1 was even identified as a cellular growth hormone. The scientists write in the scientific journals about how cancers grow. They sustain their grants from the government to continue their particular research. However, their observations are not marketed. There is no group that can benefit financially from such evidence. Do you believe that dairy executives want you to know that hormones in milk make cancer grow? They should come to terms with the sweeping deception that the cigarette industry CEOs have recently done. Do all adults have cancer? Cancer occurs more frequently than is commonly believed. The well-respected science writer Gina Colada revealed in her November 8, 1994 New York Times column that virtually all adults have cancer, which normally stops growing as a result of tight genetic controls. That article also revealed, through autopsy studies of premature deaths not related to cancer, that although 1% of women between the ages of 40 and 50 are clinically diagnosed with breast cancer, 39% of those women who died premature deaths had undiagnosed cancer in their breasts. However, Gina Kolata did not explore the role of factors in breast cancer. To many scientists, IGF-1 is the key factor in the growth and proliferation of human cancer. IGF-1 does not cause cancer. It simply releases the tight bonds which the immune system places on cancers which exist in the body and are quite common. IGF-1 is like adding gasoline to a fire. Hundreds of lines of converging evidence meet to implicate IGF-1 as the key factor in the growth and proliferation of cancer. The processes are well illustrated and are understood by the scientific community. Why have they kept this information such a big secret? I would never have learned any of these things which I've related to you if milk had not been genetically engineered. Monsanto, seeking to profit from America's largest food industry, may very well have destroyed it. It is no wonder that the small American farmer did not welcome BST or the associated controversies which have the potential to educate American consumers. Drugstores are stocked full of items to counteract the reactions brought about from consuming milk and dairy products. The casein in milk has been described as a primary cause of mucus and congestion. There are studies that have linked milk consumption with childhood earaches. Pills for headaches and sprays for nasal congestion line the shelves of America's drugstores and supermarkets. There are allergy capsules and antihistamines as well as laxatives to relieve irritable bowel syndrome. 3/4 of the human race cannot digest lactose in milk. All people produce antibodies to bovine proteins with antihistamine production. The range of people's symptoms can be relieved by the products sold in pharmacies. There are stool softeners and medications to relieve intestinal gas, bloating, and diarrhea. There are antacid tablets for indigestion that also contain dietary calcium in a form that is easily assimilated by the human body. There are so many manufacturers who benefit from diseases and symptoms caused by milk, and these companies should be paying royalties on the sales of their remedies to the dairy industry. Without milk and dairy consumption, there might not be a need for many of these pharmaceuticals. Milk is responsible for an important part of the cash flow of drugstores. Without a strong milk industry, we might see many of these apothecaries fail. Many diseases have been attributed to milk and dairy consumption. Not only have bovine proteins been linked with allergies, but they've been implicated as a cause of serious diseases such as cancer, heart disease, and osteoporosis. By consuming milk and dairy products, we may be placing a final restraint on our ability to extend our longevity and live well over 100 years of age. By discontinuing the consumption of milk and dairy products, we might very well discover a fountain of youth. Harvey and Marilyn Diamond, in Fit for Life, the best-selling book that changed the way people combine their foods, devoted a chapter to dairy products and concluded that there was nothing that would destroy a healthy diet regimen as successfully as milk and dairy products. The Diamonds gave milk credit for cholesterol problems as well as allergies and seriously challenged the enormous calcium myth perpetrated on the American public by the dairy industry. Advice to doctors from doctors. Doctors who had not placed strong emphasis on nutrition in medical school were at last getting an accurate and unbiased message concerning milk. Many MDs who subscribed to the trade journal, the Townsend Letter for Doctors, drank their first sip of milk's great controversy. The Townsend Letter recently included a column on the dangers of cow's milk. This medical newsletter gave credit to good marketing by the dairy industry, which informs us to drink milk because it is, quote, wholesome and necessary, unquote. The newsletter responds to this marketing message by saying, in reality, cow's milk, especially processed cow's milk, has been linked to a variety of health problems. Among those problems attributed to milk and dairy consumption by this medical newsletter written by Doctors for Doctors include mucus production, hemoglobin loss, childhood diabetes, heart disease, atherosclerosis, arthritis, kidney stones, mood swings, depression, irritability, and last but certainly not least, allergies. 9 months earlier, the seed to this story was planted in the August issue of Natural Health. In an article entitled, Don't Drink Your Milk, author Nathaniel Mead describes nature's perfect food as being linked to a great number of serious health problems. Reed's article begins by including a quote from a Washington, D.C. pediatrician by the name of Russell Bonet. When asked his opinion on what single change in the American diet would produce the greatest health benefit, Bonet responded, eliminating dairy products. Reed interviewed Dr. Frank Oski, who at the time was chief of pediatrics at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Oski said, at least 50% of all children in the United States are allergic to cow's milk, many undiagnosed. Dairy products are the leading cause of food allergy, often revealed by diarrhea, constipation, and fatigue. Many cases of asthma and sinus infections are reported to be relieved and even eliminated by cutting out dairy. The exclusion of dairy, however, must be complete to see any benefit. Is sudden infant death syndrome an allergic reaction? The medical literature contains many references suggesting that an allergy to milk is the primary cause of SIDS. In 1960, a British journal, The Lancet, implicated a milk allergy, hypersensitivity to milk, as the cause of sudden infant death. The November 5, 1994 issue of The Lancet compared infants who breastfeed to infants who consume cow's milk with formula based on cow's milk. Those who consumed cow's milk were 14 times more likely to die from diarrhea-related complications and 4 times more likely to die of pneumonia than their breastfed babies. This study implicated intolerance and allergy to cow's milk products as a factor in sudden infant death syndrome. The most shocking study, also reported in The Lancet, appeared on June 4, 1994. Histological analysis of 48 infants who died from SIDS were compared with tissue samples of 30 infants who died from other non-pulmonary causes. The findings were that those infants who died of SIDS expressed inappropriate or inflammatory responses suggesting violent allergic reactions to, quote, something foreign, unquote. Lung tissue and cells showed responses similar to bronchial wall inflammation and asthma. These tiny infants were reacting to something. It was not the role of the scientist to guess what that something was. Their job was to supply a clue. Do you suppose each of those babies enjoyed a cigar before retiring for the evening? How about a glass of cognac? These infants did not have pneumonia before going to bed. Otherwise, their death certificates would not have read sudden infant death. Each and every child who died of SIDS probably had one thing in common. Each victim most likely ate his or her last meal in the hours preceding death. Proteins are casein, beta-lactoglobulin, and alpha-lactoalbumin. These 3 ingredients have been identified as the major allergens in cow's milk. Authors of a study performed at the University of Brescia, Italy, developed a correlation between these 3 cow proteins and childhood allergies. At the conclusion of their article, the authors suggest a therapeutic strategy of soy protein as a substitute for cow's milk. Warning! Monsanto is now marketing genetically engineered soybeans. Shall there be a sequel to this book entitled, Don't Drink the Soy Milk? This issue is front-page news in Europe, where citizens of many nations have been protesting and rejecting products containing the new gene-altered soybeans. Constipate your baby. Hint. Got milk? Scientists at the University of Palermo discovered that constipation symptoms returned to a control group of infants 48 to 72 hours after they were placed on a regimen of cow's milk proteins. Their determination was that constipation in infants may have an allergic pathogenesis. Researchers at the Department of Clinical Medicine, University of Tampere, Finland, indicated that diet has a significant effect on the developing immune system. They discovered that formula-fed babies at the age of 3 months were secreting low levels of serum antibodies to bovine proteins contained in their formula. FDA believes this is not possible because, in theory, these proteins are destroyed by digestive enzymes. Message to FDA. Milk proteins survive digestion. Doctors at the Department of Pediatrics, Odense University Hospital in Denmark, noted that most formula-fed infants develop symptoms of allergic rejection to cow milk proteins before 1 month of age. The majority of infants tested had 2 or more symptoms. About 50 to 70% experience rashes or other skin symptoms. 50 to 60% experience gastrointestinal symptoms, and 20 to 30% respiratory symptoms. The recommended therapy was to avoid cow's milk. An article titled, "More Evidence That Milk Causes Diabetes and Anemia in Prevention and Nutrition," revealed the following, quote, "It has long been suspected that cow's milk proteins are a principal cause of diabetes in children, and a new report in the New England Journal of Medicine adds more support for this explanation. In comparisons of different countries, the prevalence of insulin-dependent diabetes parallels the consumption of cow's milk," unquote. The actual report being cited was published in Volume 327 of the New England Journal of Medicine in July of 1992. That journal article presented evidence implicating cow's milk as the cause of diabetes in every one of 142 diabetic children in the study. Each child produced antibodies to a bovine protein called bovine serum albumin. The antibodies, which were naturally produced to fight this invader, then turned on the children's own insulin-producing beta cells located in the pancreas. This form of diabetes often leads to blindness, kidney disease, and heart disease. The Journal of the American Dietetic Association supports the conclusion of the previous study and suggests that the avoidance of cow's milk products during the first few months of life may help reduce the incidence of insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. As a result of these reports, the American Academy of Pediatrics condemned the use of milk for children under 1 year of age. They did not include children over 1 year of age and all adults. Scientists have produced experimental evidence linking the development of diabetes directly to the consumption of dairy products. Researchers at the Institute for Pediatric Endocrinology in Sydney, Australia, noted that the introduction of milk-based formula before the age of 3 months was associated with an increased risk of infant-associated diabetes. Here's what can occur when a baby drinks cow's milk. Scientists at the University of Helsinki, Finland, discovered that early introduction of cow's milk in babies 3 months of age and younger often resulted in complete insulin deficiency. This pathology occurred because naturally occurring beta cells were destroyed by the infant's allergic reaction created in response to the presence of milk proteins. Scientists in Italy noted similar effects when they analyzed data from diabetic children. Their conclusion indicates an absolute cause and effect relationship between milk consumption and diabetes. Researchers at the University of Colorado published a paper in the July-August 1994 issue of the Journal of Endocrinology Investigations, which identified a bovine albumin peptide as a trigger of insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. Early exposure to cow's milk was linked to the development of diabetes in a carefully controlled rat experiment by scientists in Canada. They linked early exposure to bovine proteins in both rodents and humans as the cause of diabetes mellitus. Their work was published in the February 1994 issue of the Journal of Immunology. Other human and rat studies performed by the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Toronto suggest that the denial of dietary cow milk proteins early in life protects animals from later contracting insulin-dependent diabetes. These are the scientific studies that the Milk Industry and Dairy Coalition prefer that you not read. The more knowledge you gain, the less ignorant you become. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance can be unhealthy. Armed with these facts, would you expose your infant to cow's milk? Now that you recognize that bovine hormones cause the body to react by producing antibodies, which sometimes destroy insulin-producing cells, do you think that it is smart to drink the hormones from another animal species? Those hormones work. If you choose to believe the FDA, who assures us that those hormones do not work, you play with a dangerous, loaded gun. If you choose to review the scientific evidence, then you've armed yourself with ammunition which will protect you. A bone to pick with dairy. Common knowledge of osteoporosis is based upon false assumptions. American women have been drinking an average of 2 pounds of milk or eating the equivalent milk and dairy products each day for their entire lives. Doctors recommend calcium intake for increasing and maintaining bone strength and bone density, which they call bone mass. According to this regimen, recommended by doctors and milk industry executives, women's bone mass would approach that of prehistoric dinosaurs. This line of reasoning should be equally extinct. 25 million American women have osteoporosis. Drinking milk does not prevent osteoporosis. Milk contains calcium. Bones contain calcium too. When we're advised to add calcium to our diets, we tend to drink milk or eat dairy foods. Calcium in milk is not efficiently utilized by the body. In order to absorb calcium, the body needs comparable amounts of another mineral element, magnesium. Milk and dairy products contain only small amounts of magnesium. Without the presence of magnesium, the body only absorbs 25% of the available dairy calcium content. The remainder of the calcium spells trouble. Without magnesium, excess calcium is utilized by the body in destructive ways. The body uses calcium to build the mortar on arterial walls, which becomes atherosclerotic plaques. Excess calcium is converted by the kidneys into painful stones, which grow in size like pearls and oysters. They block urinary tracts. Excess calcium contributes to arthritis. Painful calcium buildup often is manifest by gout. Society stresses the importance of calcium and less frequently magnesium. Yet, magnesium is vital to enzymatic activity. In addition to ensuring proper absorption of calcium, magnesium is critical to proper neural and muscular function and maintains proper pH balance in the body. Magnesium, along with vitamin B6, pyridoxine, helps to dissolve calcium phosphate stones, which often accumulate from excesses of dairy intake. Good sources of magnesium include beans, green leafy vegetables like kale and collards, whole grains, and orange juice. Non-dairy sources of calcium include green leafy vegetables, seafood, almonds, asparagus, broccoli, cabbage, oats, beans, parsley, sesame seeds, and tofu. Salmon and sardines eaten with the bones are especially high in calcium. Osteoporosis is not a problem that should be associated with lack of calcium intake. Osteoporosis results from calcium loss. The massive amounts of protein in milk result in a 50% loss of calcium in the urine. In other words, by doubling your protein intake, there will be a loss of 1 to 1.5% in skeletal mass per year in postmenopausal women. The calcium contained in leafy green vegetables is more easily absorbed than the calcium in milk, and plant proteins do not result in calcium loss the same way as animal proteins do. A postmenopausal woman loses 1 to 1.5% of bone mass per year. What will be the effect after 20 years? When osteoporosis occurs, levels of calcium in the blood are high. Milk only adds to these high levels of calcium, which are excreted or used by the body to add to damaging atherosclerosis, gout, kidney stones, etc. Your bone mass does not increase after age 35. This is a biological fact that is not in dispute by scientists. However, this fact is ignored by marketing geniuses in the milk industry who make certain that women this age and older are targeted consumers for milk and dairy products. At least 1 in 4 women will suffer from osteoporosis with fractures of the ribs, hip, or forearm. In 1994, University of Texas researchers published results of an experiment indicating that supplemental calcium is ineffective in preventing bone loss. Within 5 years of the initial onset of menopause, there is an accelerated rate of loss of bone, particularly from the spine. During this period of time, estrogen replacement is most effective in preventing rapid bone density loss. Bone mass is genetically determined. In December of 1994, another study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition revealed that skeletal size and bone mass are genetically programmed. Optimal skeletal size is achieved through adequate calcium intake in an individual's youth. However, excess calcium has an effect upon bone mass. Once enough calcium is introduced, the excess is either excreted in the urine or absorbed by the kidneys, arteries, and liver. This excess calcium can cause great damage. The decrease in skeletal mass associated with osteoporosis in women is primarily caused by the age-dependent decrease in bone secretion by the ovaries. While optimal calcium intake in childhood and adolescence is important for achieving proper bone density, calcium intake in adulthood has little significance. Exercise, vitamin D, and estrogen prevent osteoporosis. The Journal of the American Medical Association article reported a Tufts University study in which 40 postmenopausal women 50 to 70 years of age were tested and measured by their participation in different levels of exercise. The conclusion of this study was that high-intensity strength training exercises are an important, effective, and feasible means to preserve bone density. In other words, exercise prevented the onset of osteoporosis. It is now recognized that insufficient levels of vitamin D are common in elderly people, especially those who are infirm and are not exposed to much sunlight. All animals, including humans, receive most of their daily vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin, from outside exposure to the sun's rays. We drink milk, which has lost its natural vitamin D through pasteurization and then been supplemented with artificial levels of vitamin D. Exercise and fresh air are better osteoporosis preventatives than milk containing calcium with added vitamin D. Protein inhibits calcium absorption. The FDA recommended dietary allowance for protein is less than 2 ounces per day. Many dietitians believe that half that amount is sufficient. The more protein you consume, the more calcium you lose. Vegetarians have significantly lower levels of osteoporosis than the general population. Nations in which protein consumption from meat is high, like the United States, have greater levels of osteoporosis than countries where meat consumption is low. Milk does not protect adults from getting osteoporosis. The dairy industry would like for you to believe that milk is nature's perfect food, the perfect medicine. Milk is really the poison responsible for human disease. In their best-selling book, Stop Osteoarthritis Now, the authors, one a medical doctor and the other a health writer, include no indexed references to the word milk. However, they do include one sentence on page 176 referenced in the index under dairy products. The authors note that when people with arthritis on low-fat vegetarian diets add dairy to their daily fare, their conditions worsen. Just one sentence for this earth-shattering news? I would have devoted an entire book to the subject. Actually, that's just what I did. For the most part, the medical establishment has ignored the obvious. So, where do cows get their calcium? Where do cows get their calcium? Certainly not by drinking milk. In the summer, cows eat lots of green stuff: grass, weeds, vines, clover, and rye. In the winter, they eat hay and different commercially prepared feeds. That green stuff contains chlorophyll. Red stuff, or blood, is very similar to chlorophyll. The basic difference between chlorophyll and hemoglobin, the major blood protein, is at the center atom of the molecule. Hemoglobin, the protein that makes our blood red, has iron as its center atom. Chlorophyll, the protein which makes plants green, has as its center atom magnesium. The magnificence of nature can be observed in the common bond between plants and humans. The active protein in our blood and the protein in the blood of plants are nearly identical. We live harmoniously, synergistically. Humans breathe in air containing oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Plants breathe in air containing carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. The 1930 Nobel Prize for Chemistry was awarded to Hans Fischer, who noted that chlorophyll and blood hemoglobin are nearly alike. Magnesium aids calcium absorption. Iron inhibits calcium absorption. Mammals eating lots of green stuff containing calcium will efficiently use that calcium to build strong bones. Mammals eating calcium without the important magnesium atoms containing chlorophyll will not efficiently use that calcium. Milk is loaded with calcium but has almost no magnesium. Unless a diet also includes magnesium, that source of calcium is not efficiently used. Remember that countries with the highest rates of hip fractures also have the highest rates of breast cancer: Denmark, Norway, Holland, and Sweden. These four nations also have the highest per capita consumption of milk and dairy products. That Dutch milkmaid carrying twin-yolk buckets of milk must be a signal to all. Many cultures, like the Japanese, consume less than 1/4 of the recommended daily intake of calcium per day, and yet these people have very low rates of osteoporosis. An American typically satisfies his calcium need by eating the recommended portions of fruits, vegetables, and protein contained in the Department of Agriculture's food pyramid. Eliminate milk and you still will satisfy all of your calcium requirements. A single cup of milk contains 291 milligrams of calcium, while 1 cup of cooked collard greens contains nearly the same amount, 290 milligrams. If one considers that only 1/4 of the milk calcium is utilized by the body because of a lack of magnesium and an overabundance of protein, then the calcium availability in 1 cup of cooked collards is equal to 5 cups of milk. There's plenty of calcium in milk, but it is not so easily absorbed. Asthma. A recent column in the U.S. News and World Reports, titled News You Can Use, reported that asthma deaths are on the rise. Perhaps you can use this news. According to Alexandra Gorman, spokeswoman for the American Lung Association, 5,487 people cannot use this news because in 1994 they succumbed to fatal asthma attacks, more than twice the number of people who died in 1979. Asthma is an inflammatory disease. The bronchial tubes in the lungs become clogged with mucus. Asthma attacks are violent reactions to those clogged airways, which become filled with the body's glue. Why would the number of asthma cases double? As usual, doctors had no clue. If asthma is diet-related, and if bovine proteins play a role in asthma, then it would be easy to compare milk consumption rates between 1979 and 1995 and see what correlations, if any, exist. Americans have changed their diet. Thanks to the Dairy Coalition, we've changed the foods we eat. We were told to drink no-fat, low-fat milk and skim milk. So we followed the advice of the fluid milk processors and consumed less fat and fluid milk, and in doing so, drank a beverage with proportionately more protein. Milk proteins cause allergies. Milk protein should not be in human bodies. They are not injected directly into the bloodstream, but they are eaten and they bypass digestive processes to enter blood serum by a circuitous route. The United States Department of Agriculture data revealed the incredible change in our diet over a 14-year period. In 1979, the average American consumed 150 pounds of high-fat, which is low-protein milk, and 75 pounds of low-fat or high-protein milk. By 1994, those numbers were reversed. In 1994, the average American drank 75 pounds of liquid whole milk and 125 pounds of low-fat milk. U.S. News and World Report reveals that the death rate has risen fastest for African Americans. Aren't African Americans also more lactose intolerant than white Americans? Are African Americans more allergic to the vast array of bovine proteins? Asthma can be prevented, although current medical philosophy is to focus upon treatment and not prevention. Asthma, what a dreadful human condition. Milk, what a shocking surprise. Mad cow disease and prions, a frightening biological forecast. High school science classes teach lessons in organic biology. Students learn that cells are dynamic in their composition and function. Inside of cells are genetic blueprints for reproduction. Each cell in the human body contains a set of plans located inside of its chromosomes. Each chromosome contains a genetically structured set of chemicals which determines how the cell is to replicate itself. The chemical substance which is the key to this entire process and which contains a double helical structure of coded chemicals is deoxyribonucleic acid, better known as DNA. Textbooks written before 1996 teach students that biological and cellular reproduction without DNA is not possible. Educators, relying upon these books and previous knowledge, teach incorrect science. They are ignorant of a newly revealed secret of nature. There is a group of chemicals recently discovered called prions, which can reproduce themselves without DNA. Prions have been passed on from cows to humans. Mad cow disease is a prion disease. Americans laugh at the thought of mad cows. The British, on the other hand, who have seen millions of cows destroyed, have a disparate sense of humor to ours. They recognize that there are diseases which turn bovine and human brains into a sponge-like material. The scientific name for mad cow is bovine spongiform encephalitis. After the first exposure to a prion, the onset of disease might take up to 20 years to develop. Prions are tiny crystals which replicate themselves and slowly destroy the human brain until Alzheimer-type symptoms develop. Your 10-year-old child picks up a glass of milk and raises it to her lips. The magic crystals in that liquid are so small that they've been unobserved by most pre-1996 scientists. You now know enough about milk to advise the child to stop before she swallows, yet you do not. These tiny crystals are as immune to digestive acids as diamonds would be unaffected by liquid dish soap. They continue through the stomach into the upper gastrointestinal tract, where they are passed through the intestinal mucosa and are absorbed directly into the bloodstream. The body sends line after line of soldiers against these invading crystals with no success. Could 98.6 Fahrenheit in cellular mechanisms succeed where 2,000-degree heat generated in laboratories could not? The child laughs, wiping away her milk mustache, unaware that she has eaten the seed to a purpling disease that will end her life in 30 years. First, it will turn her from a happy girl, perhaps a mother in the prime of her life, into a senile woman at such a very young age, while it converts her brain into sponge-like material. The name spongiform would be used to identify the state and condition of her brain. When she can no longer dress herself, something that might very well occur 1 week after her first symptom, they will name this disease after the first doctors who treated such symptoms, Dr. Crutchfeld and Dr. Jakob. Crutchfeld-Jakob disease. In 1996, the European continent panicked, and one nation, Great Britain, killed 3 million cows, and after the slaughter they burned the carcasses, burying the remains deep underground. America laughed at a new generation of mad cow disease jokes. That's because in America, we are immune from such disaster, aren't we? The crystal prion tumbles through the circulatory system of a little girl, too small to do any damage to the cell walls of the veins and arteries. Like a balloon bouncing slowly off a smooth plaster wall and then living room furniture, the crystal travels through the veins and into the lungs, where blood is enriched by oxygen, then through the arteries and then around it goes. On one circuit, it may travel to the tips of the fingers, and another to the nose. Hundreds of trips, thousands of voyages, and unlimited paths with free admission throughout the human amusement park, which acts as host, until one day the crystal finds in a final nesting place, the brain. There are perhaps 100 billion cells in the brain, and 80 billion of these are protective bodies named glial cells. Like big fluffy pillows, these glials form a barrier, difficult but not impossible for most substances to pass through. Glial cells nourish and support the real workers of the brain, the neurons. Together, the glial cells form a wall called the blood-brain barrier. The crystals, so small, a random voyage with no nucleus or intellect so instructing them, are fated to one day end up deep within the brain. How many trips will it take? That's of no importance to a crystal with no brain, simply possessing magic. Can one crystal do damage, we wonder? Can something with no DNA, no genetic code, no set of instructions, can this something invade an organ like the brain and replicate itself? Biologists, chemists, and physiologists unite. Certainly not. Impossible. Mother Nature smiles. The gods on Olympus laugh at our lack of understanding and our surety that we know everything there is to know. The crystal moves gently with the neural tides, awash within a charged aqueous solution of protein, an electrical and chemical environment, allowing that crystal to create its magic. Mad cow disease. In 1990, a new disease was diagnosed among Great Britain's dairy cows. This neurological disorder, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE, was appropriately named mad cow disease by the British press. It is believed that cows contract BSE by eating protein including grains, blood meal, and bone meal from dead animals, which are part of their feed. The disease affects the animal's central nervous system and is degenerative. The brain literally dissolves a piece at a time, taking on a sponge-like consistency. Cattle with BSE appear to be crazy or mad. Actually, the animals are more sad than mad. They often exhibit odd behavior, such as twitching, convulsions, loss of muscular coordination, and locomotive function. However, British people suspected for many years that the meat from their cattle was tainted. Government officials denied for many years that humans contracted diseases from cows. By May 1990, 25% of the English refused to eat beef. Like dominoes, the nations of the world soon began to ban British beef and milk products. The condition became so serious, epidemic, that in order to save what was left of the British meat and dairy industry, English regulators agreed to slaughter 3 million animals and incinerate the carcasses. Scientists noted that mad cow disease showed a characteristic never seen before. It appeared to easily infect and affect animals of other species when transmitted orally. In August of 1994, cattleman Howard Lyman delivered a speech at the World Vegetarian Congress in The Hague, Netherlands. He remarked, quote, "If you think that mad cow disease is an English problem, think again. About 8 months ago, there occurred the first case of mad cow disease in Canada. Once more, we were told there was no problem. That cow, who had come from England, by the way, did not affect any other cows of the herd base. So confident were they that this was true that the government killed all 270 of the farmers' herd and burnt their bodies, promising that they would find every cow with disease, kill her, and burn her," unquote. At that same conference describing Gamma cow syndrome, America's equivalent of mad cow disease, which kills at least 100,000 cows per year, Lyman said, quote, "When a farmer has a dead cow, he has two choices. He can call the veterinarian, who will come out and say, 'Hey, Jack, you got a dead cow. You owe me $150. Or the farmer can call the renderer, who will come out and say, 'Hey, Jack, you got a dead cow. I can take it off your hands.' Now, which one is he going to choose? The renderer makes cows into feed, which is then fed back to cows or other animals. In this way, one cow with mad cow disease could infect thousands," unquote. Indeed, that's just what happened to the cows in England. Many fear that mad cow disease is affecting America's cows and in turn could be responsible for Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. These prions, tiny silent crystals finding their way into our brains, laying dormant for decades. Then one day, many years later, they rapidly turn the human brain into a sponge. On August 23, 1997, a story appearing in the London Times revealed that a 24-year-old vegetarian had contracted Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. The article discussed fears that milk and cheese might have been a source of infection. Richard Rose, writing in his brilliant chronicle, Deadly Feasts, reveals that bone meal from Dana cows might also be a source for Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. He recounts his conversation with Colton Gatchusek, the Nobel laureate who knows more about transmissible spongiform disease than any man living. When asked whether one should use bone meal on roses, Gatchusek replied, "I wouldn't if I were you." I recently received a letter from Gatchusek from his jail cell in Frederick, Maryland. I wonder how this very brilliant man was silenced at a time when the world so desperately needs his knowledge. What pressures were exerted on our society and FBI to illegally tap Gatchusek's telephones and to bribe one of his close associates so that Gatchusek be betrayed at a moment in history when the world is faced with a disease with such horrible implications. Gatchusek wrote to me and said, quote, "I thank you for reaching me at the bottom of your rabbit hole at the Mad Hatter's table. However, unlike Alice, I have little prospect of finding my way out of the hole into which I have fallen. I can do nothing in my current situation about the things we have discussed, as I have no access to scientific papers or books," unquote. Let's talk about breastfeeding. There is no better substance to nourish a human infant than the breast milk from its mother. Milk from cows should be consumed by calves, not humans. Milk from cats should be swallowed by kittens, not dogs. Each species of mammal has developed nature's perfect formula for its young. Most of the baby formulas sold in pharmacies and supermarkets are processed from cow's milk. Non-cow's milk alternatives do exist. There are also soy-based formulas developed for infants whose reactions to bovine proteins in traditional formulas are intolerable. There is no test or measure of tolerability. Infants who are fortunate enough to have discriminating parents able to note symptoms such as colic, congestion, and discomfort discontinue the use of milk products at an early age. Many parents never make the connection between the many symptoms of milk intolerance. Once children are weaned from the breast or a bottle of formula, parents seek healthy alternatives. Supermarkets have many types of juices available. There are 100% juice items like apple juice and mixed juices and products containing 10% juice with sugar added. Water remains the cheapest drink of all. Most families have budgets and shop carefully for foods and beverages. One staple appearing on most shopping lists is milk. Breakfast in America is built around milk and dairy products. American meals are really quite boring when compared with other cuisines. The typical American breakfast preparation takes under 1 minute and involves a cereal box and a carton of milk. My children were surprised after a recent trip to New York City's Chinatown for breakfast. We enjoyed congee, an exploded rice soup cooked with chicken and vegetables. There were also meat and fish-filled dumplings and fried bread. The taste, texture, and variety of food was an Epicurean delight. There's got to be something to put on my cereal, my kids used to yell. I no longer wanted milk in our household. When I first began to learn about dairy products, my initial concern was about genetically engineered hormones. My solution was to find processors who would not accept milk from RBST-treated cows. After coming to the realization that all milk contained hormones, we began to purchase dried milk. During the processing of powdered milk, I learned that the protein hormones were destroyed when milk was heated at the high temperatures necessary to turn liquid into powder quickly and efficiently. I would mix a package of powdered milk with a quart of bottled water to yield a liquid appropriate for any cereal. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it just didn't taste the same. Soon my family began eating different breakfasts. No longer did breakfast preparations take under a minute. Bowl, spoon, open box of cereal, pour the milk, hurry up and eat, take the kids to school. We still have an open box of fruity-shaped cereal left on our kitchen table as an experiment. The bugs just won't eat the stuff. Neither will the bacteria, who are armed with an innate intelligence which we seem to have lost. Dairy products are a part of our life, although they've been minimized and are now condiments, not main dishes. Where we once fit into the profile of the average American consuming 2.5 pounds of milk a day, each member of our family now averages less than 1 ounce per day. Sometimes I am asked 1 or 2 questions by panicking mothers or friends. The most frequently occurring query is, what do you use instead of milk? I answer, what do you mean instead of milk? I drink water or juice. Sometimes the question is clarified. What do you do for calcium? I then try to explain that the research shows that dietary calcium does not play as large a role in determining bone density as the dairy industry would have one believe. I go on to tell the questioner that dairy products most certainly are responsible for osteoporosis and cite the nations with the highest osteoporosis rates, the Scandinavian dairy consumers. Some people just do not want to listen and find change of routine too traumatic. These people would deny all of the overwhelming scientific evidence, and for them, dairy products will forever fill their cupboards and bodies. These people should realize that America has actually discovered the fountain of youth. By avoiding milk and dairy products, people can live longer and healthier. Isn't that what Ponce de Leon was trying to discover in looking for his fountain of youth? We most certainly have the potential to live many more years than we do. What a remarkable effect dairy has had on keeping us from reaching that potential. Heart disease, cancer, allergies, fat and cholesterol leading to overweight and out-of-shape bodies, growing old before their time. Without milk, would we live an extra decade or 2? I believe so, but such controlled studies are impossible to perform. There have been no formal studies, but I'd like to propose one for the next millennium. A review of the scientific evidence is certainly convincing. Milk and dairy products cause many health problems. We'd be better off without them. What does my family drink? Primarily water. There have been books written about water, and I don't intend to get involved with a discussion of the many water issues and controversies. Just drink water. Our bodies need water. It cleanses and refurbishes cells. We could get water from juice or fruit or soda or beer. Why not just plain water? It's the best drink I know of. The water supplied by our water company comes from a nearby reservoir where we go fishing for catfish, carp, and bass. There is an abundance of wildlife that shares the water with the residents of my county. The water, which used to be purified with chlorine, is now treated and made purer with ozone, a very reactive form of oxygen. The water does not smell of chemicals and tastes sweet right from the tap. I also make smoothies. I'll freeze trays of ice cubes from various juices. Sometimes I'll freeze half a gallon of orange juice into small cubes, then take 7 cubes, fill a glass with another juice, pour both into a blender, and have an incredible drink that doubles as a rich dessert by adding more juice cubes. In the summer, I peel and seed a cantaloupe or honeydew and put the entire fruit into the blender. The liquid goes into an ice cube tray, and the result is a low-calorie, nutritious snack. The ice cubes are closer in consistency to hard ice cream than ice cubes made from just water. We have a juicer and occasionally make our own cider. However, it's easier to buy fresh apple cider without preservatives from the local supermarket. A recent visit to my health food store revealed many milk alternatives, including almond milk, rice dream, even soy, and oat milk. Years of hearing from their parents the phrase, "Drink your milk, it's good for you," will probably result in these children saying the same thing to their children. The British poet Wordsworth wrote, quote, "A child is the father of the man," unquote. We will repeat the same phrases, mistakes, positive imprinting on our children that we receive from our parents and that they receive from our grandparents. Parents tell their kids to drink milk because their parents told them to drink milk. All because one day somebody got the carefully marketed message that milk was good for you. These kids, when given a choice, drink anything but milk at home. Yet the average American consumes more milk and dairy products than any other food. As a great philosopher and comic, W.C. Fields stated, quote, "My illness is due to my doctor's insistence that I drink milk, a whitish fluid that forced down helpless babies," unquote. Isn't that what we do to ourselves and our children? We do it because our parents did it to us. We do it because we believe that milk is healthy for us. We do it because we are continuously sold a bill of goods by the milk manufacturers of America. Do they need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars marketing this message to us every year? There really hasn't been a competitor marketing the message that milk was not healthy. We had taken milk for granted. We drank milk and ate cheese and never imagined that there were so many problems associated with dairy products. If not for the genetic engineering controversy, we might never have explored milk's true composition. We most certainly would never have suspected that milk contained powerful growth hormones. We most certainly would never have made the connection between milk consumption and cancer and heart disease and dozens of other human miseries. Got milk? Not after listening to this tape. Get milk? No way.